Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order.
Thank you, Chairman. To the technical staff, I'm trying to resume the video and it pops a message saying unable to start video. Okay, thank you.
Right now, okay.
Thank you.
Great. Are we all set? We're ready?
So technically we're ready.
Okay, fantastic. All right, this is the Permit Review Committee of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks. Today's date, Thursday, October 1st. I'm going to call this meeting to order and start with the roll call. Commissioner Aguirre.
Present here and see you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hughes.
Here, I can hear you and see you.
Thank you. Commissioner Osborne.
I'm here and I can hear you and see you.
And I am Commissioner Wong. We do have
A quorum.
thank you. Quorum. Earlier this year, Governor Pritzker signed Public Act 101-0640, making certain amendments to the Open Meetings Act so that we, along with other boards and commissions, can continue to host virtual meetings during this COVID-19 public health emergency, provided that certain conditions are made. One of those conditions is that Chairman Leon, as head of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, determines that an in-person meeting in Chicago on the Commission on Chicago Landmarks is not practical or prudent. I want to make sure that our virtual meeting meets all the conditions of the Open Meetings Act as amended. Therefore, I'd like to state, pursuant to the newly created Section 7E2 of the Open Meetings Act, that Chairman Leon determined that an in-person meeting of the Permit Review Committee of the Commission of Chicago Landmarks is not practical or prudent. Similarly, Chairman Leon made a determination pursuant to the newly created Section 7E5 that because of the disaster is declared by the governor, it is unfeasible for at least one member of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks or its chief administrative officer or its chief legal officer to be physically present at the meeting place, in so much that there is no physical meeting place. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Commission of Chicago Landmarks on June 4th, 2020, regarding the chairman's emergency rulemaking powers, Chairman Leon issued emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public commission meetings and provisions for remote public participation effective June 23rd, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 emergency. These rules were posted on the Commission's website. In line with these emergency rules, today's regular Permit Review Committee meeting is a virtual meeting being simulcast to the general public via live streaming. Permit Review Committee meetings have been held virtually since May of this year. Meetings are structured to minimize the chances for technical difficulties. Members of the general public have been encouraged to submit written statements in advance of the meeting, and those have been posted on the Commission's website and are available to the public view during the virtual meeting at www.chicago.gov/CCL. Members of the public desiring to speak at today's meetings were required to register before the meeting. Applicants and their representatives, as well as aldermen, were asked to contact staff if they desire to speak, and they will be able to do so after the staff presentation on a specific project. 5 people have registered to speak on 3 agenda items, and we will now hear their statements. I'll call out agenda items and the names of the persons who have requested to speak. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes each. So regarding agenda item number 1, the project at 1810 North Wells, 4 people have registered to speak. And I will start with Ward Miller. So Mr. Miller, if you could proceed, please.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, for the record, Ward Miller, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We stand united with the Old Town Triangle community to encourage and maintain this former stable and garage building from 1883 as a contributing building to the Chicago Landmark District, that is the Old Town Triangle Landmark District. We realize that in Old Town, we see a lot of changes to facades over time. And this is a really unique district where a lot of the frame cottage buildings had experienced many changes over time. And yet, with those changes, there's always encouragement and enforcement, if you will, to some degree, to restore these cottages and these other buildings. And that same idea should apply to these masonry buildings. So we really want to encourage this to maintain a contributing building to the landmark district and its preservation. I think one other thing to really consider by this commission and this permit review committee is adopting the mid-century modern context statement, which was drawn in part by Terry Tatum, the late Terry Tatum. And that was promised several years ago, and it was supposed to be introduced to the commission and accepted by the commission. And this is for buildings from the period of 1929, where the designation, if you will, falls off or drops off. The period of significance is 1871 and 1928, 1929. And this would protect buildings from 1929 to 1970, including some really remarkable buildings by Edgar Miller and Saul Kagan, Bruce Graham of SOM, Walter Netsch, his own house by SOM, and buildings by Stanley Tigerman and others. And this would also sort of clarify what's important to protect with buildings like this that had changes into the 1940s and beyond. So we really want to encourage that context statement be looked at, be accepted and adopted by the commission. And that would really help tremendously with these efforts in Old Town. So we want to really encourage that. And again, we really support the neighborhood, and the 110 emails I saw and letters to the staff and the aldermen encouraging preservation of this building, this garage at 1810, and also keep it a contributing building to the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Second person who signed up to speak is Diane Gonzalez. Ms. Gonzalez, if you'd proceed. Ms. Gonzalez?
Can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Diane Gonzalez. I'm a 46-year-long resident of the Old Town Triangle Association and a member of the Historic District Committee. I first say good afternoon to everyone. This is a statement requesting a delay in changing 1810 Wells to non-contributing status. 1810 Wells was designated a contributing status building in our 1984 National Register designation. Contributing means a building has important architectural and historical features that survived from the post-fire period that Ward just mentioned, about 1871 through about 1929. That's our period of inclusion. Contributing is the second highest level. The highest, of course, is significant, being reserved for buildings with very minimal changes. We have 256 contributing buildings in the district. 1810 Wells and all these others have undergone some change. In 1883, George Quitman pulled a permit to construct a stable on this site. Quitman Stable, then Hyde Stable, later as an automotive repair garage, until the most recent flower shop complex. This developer's research stated that most of the stable and the later garage was torn down in 1940 when a listing was found for a sundry building permit to wreck and partially demolish it. The midsection and the roof were wrecked in 1940, as the index stated. It appears that the bowstring truss roof and lengthy skylight took the place of a wooden lower midsection. The building's envelope and exterior bricks on southwest and north sides appear original. Yes, it's changed. As mentioned, all of our buildings since the post-fire years. The developer believes that it was deemed contributing in error and should not hold that status. As one who worked on the designation back in the 1980s, all of us volunteers looked at this building, gateway, thinking horses leaving the stable, Lincoln Park directly across the street, up and down Lincoln and Wells, a specific gateway building in our district. Then the repair garage came along, and that was several garages that operated out of there. All those outside walls, almost 140 years worth, and the envelope of the building remain the same. For example, our house nearby is of contributing status, as are many. We had a very different front window and transom, a storefront which housed a barbershop. And laughingly, I kind of wished it was still a barbershop during the pandemic so we could hang out and get safe haircuts. But these outer walls remain, as I keep saying, with circa 1883 bricks. The envelope's the same. If you let this structure become non-contributing, others will follow. How many neighbors have worked to follow the guidelines? What do we say to them? The developers who've eyed Old Town. We request a delay. The Triangle has received, as Ward said, about 100+ emails. Neighbors are shocked and dismayed. Their fear is you will be setting us up to lose the district. Please, let's delay and let's talk so that we can figure out how to keep this building contributing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Third person who signed up to speak was Shannon Waterfield. Ms. Waterfield, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. My name is Shannon Waterfield. I'm a homeowner and a resident in Old Town for over 20 years. And I scratched out a bunch of things I wanted to cram into this 3 minutes, but I want to drive home some really important points. First, I want to thank all of our neighbors who have hung online because I know you're all out there. And I want to thank our passionate neighbors and homeowners who choose to live here in the Old Town Triangle and believe in our common bond of preservation. As you can all see from our impressive number of emails directed to this commission, we certainly know how to rally when we feel our common bond is being threatened. Our alderman just presented the final development proposal plans to our community last week on September 22nd. We received the PRC agenda the very next day, and within 9 days, here we are. There is not enough time to be afforded to this community to fully comprehend the ramifications of this project to our historic district. We are asking for a delay on going forward with this pre-permitting process. Should make total sense to all of you. Several of you are new on this commission, commissioners, and I thank you for your service. However, you may not know very much about our 200-year-old Old Town community. And I would just encourage you to go on our website and you can get a lot of information there. But what is most important to us right now is this historic district. As you can see, it's closely guarded by our community. One of our most important missions is to preserve the architectural and historical integrity of the buildings in the Triangle. I'm asking, and we are all asking, for a delay in the permitting process. Our community needs to weigh in and our research needs to be completed. A comprehensive community-based effort is imperative and our community efforts are in the infant stage. Our community was not engaged by the City of Chicago in reaching this decision to declassify a building that represents the gateway to our historic district, and we are owed at least that. We are also owed an opportunity to counter this decision. We already have received an analysis from the former director of the landmarks divisions of the Department of Planning and Development, who says that at least 3 of the 4 walls of the 1810 Wells building are indeed contributing and must be preserved. The developers are swarming around Old Town. Real estate investment firms who want to widen their portfolios cannot wait to enter this rich area and knock our cottages down and replace them with multi-million-dollar homes with curb cuts for their underground garages. Just look at our neighboring streets of Hudson, Cleveland, Mohawk, Howe, and on and on. Finally, what I hear over and over again from my OTT neighbors is how the highlight of their days is to stroll or ride their bikes to this beautiful street of Old Town. The proposal to declassify 1810 North Wells will most certainly open the floodgates to development, hence demolition. The very reasons against which we became a historic landmark district. We bought into the promise of preservation. It is the duty of the Chicago Commission on Landmarks to keep that promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waterfield. Susan Baji. I'm sorry if I misspoken her name.
My name is Susan Bogie. I'm
Thank you.
president of Williamsburg Gardens Homeowner Association at 200 West Menominee Street. The east side of our building is 1800 to 1806 North Wells, next door but one to 1810 North Wells. When I was transferred to Chicago from Boston 40 years ago and was looking for a place to live, I happened to drive down Menominee. I knew nothing about Chicago, but immediately knew that I had found some place special that I wanted to make my home. 1 week later, I was under contract. My opinion hasn't changed in the intervening years. The Old Town Triangle is warm, welcoming, friendly, an oasis in a big city. And what makes this area so special? The fact that it is landmarked, which preserves its unique character. I don't understand why landmarks would even consider starting the process of decertifying a building's contributing status just for the benefit of a developer. There is no benefit to the Old Town Triangle, just the opposite. It will only hurt our community. The people who live here don't want it. Residents have clearly spoken to the aldermen and to this commission that decertifying 1810 North Wells is not what we want. The building in question has been a contributing landmark property for decades. The proposed structure dilutes the significance of 1810 North Wells as a transportation center. Decertifying 1810 North Wells will start us on a slippery slope of other contributing buildings in the area requesting decertification. Before you know it, the unique charm and gorgeous historic buildings in the Triangle will be a thing of the past. We've seen it happen in neighborhood after neighborhood in this city. This has to stop somewhere. It has to stop in the Old Town Triangle. Please listen to neighborhood residents who have overwhelmingly declared their opposition to decertification. We do not want the change that this project will bring to our treasured historic area. We do not want to see a project that will only benefit the developer while harming the neighborhood. We don't want to see our landmark status undermined, and undermined it will be. In light of the negative impact of decertifying 1810 North Wells as a contributing structure on the historic significance of the area, we urge the Commission to vote against decertification. We ask that you please listen to the voices of the people and to the research presented by the Old Town Triangle Association that shows 1810 North Wells is a contributing landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bode. Kathy Roche. Ms. Roche.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hello. My name is Kathy Roche, 16-year resident of Old Town. Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to talk today. You know, you have a big responsibility today, which is to apply the landmark guidelines in an equal and consistent way. You hold all the power. And today, hundreds of Old Town residents are counting on you to apply the landmark guidelines in an equal and consistent way. Old Town residents follow the strict rules that apply to living in such a district when they need to upgrade or rehab their homes. They do it willingly because they love their historic community. But today, something is very different. This is not about a new porch or cornice. This is about something that has never been done before and will have a huge impact on buildings in our community, and that is taking away protected landmark status. You would be setting precedent. There will be no turning back, and our village will be broken. And the disturbing part is, from what the community understands, it's based on one report, a developer's report, and without the community's engagement. Old Town residents have no representation in regards to this monumental rule change. Declassification, it's terrifying to us. We've had little time to understand, collaborate, and refute the claims from Condor Partners paid experts. But now in the last 3 days, the community has been engaged and the response has been overwhelming. It's simple. Old Town residents want the vote delayed for 30 days. We want to have time to understand why the city would consider declassifying a 140-year-old building in such a rush process. We want to understand why the city is considering the decision based just on a developer's paid for report, a developer who has everything to gain and lose by this outcome. And the community wants the opportunity to have an independent analysis or report made to compare to the developers. Commissioners, historic landmark rules aren't fluid. They should be equal and consistent. And in closing, I would like you to consider another reason to delay the permit process for 30 days. The last 7 months, we've been dealing with a COVID outbreak in our neighborhood. Neighbors have been sick, they've lost their jobs, we've lost time. We've been dealing with protests and looting. We are taking care of elderly parents and neighbors, and we're homeschooling our children. Put this into perspective. Your commission pushing this permit process through would be insulting to every family and resident in the Old Town Historic Community who's been under great stress during this pandemic and city unrest. You hold all the power to make a decision that will have a huge impact on the future of our community. Give the community 30 days, that's not very long, to have their own analysis done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Roche. On the next agenda item number 2, the project at 208 South Lasalle. One person has registered to speak. That's Mr. Miller, Ward Miller. If we could hear from you, please. Ward, are you there?
Mr. Miller, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I was having some difficulty doing that for some reason. Can you hear me, commissioners?
We sure can.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, Ward Miller with Preservation Chicago on the 208 South LaSalle Street building. We at Preservation Chicago met with and encouraged the ownership last year to seek additional restoration of the 208 South LaSalle Street building's exterior features, including the restoration of the now missing cornice. There was a historic cornice on this building. It was removed long ago, and also to address other repairs to the terracotta facade of the building and restoration of any components and elements relating to that facade and missing features. We want to encourage more preservation of this historic building, which is so much a part of those iconic views of LaSalle Street and the LaSalle Street Financial Canyon, sort of the Wall Street, if you will, of Chicago and the Midwest. And this is one of those buildings which has seen lots of redevelopment. It's partially an office building on one side, partially a hotel on another. And it's really an incredible building that really helps to define the Central Loop and the financial district, and any type of reinvestment in the building's facades or what the public experiences, even extending to the interior and portions of the light court, would really be an asset to our city. So we really want to encourage the team here to look at this building and restore that cornice, restore any elements of the terracotta facade that are missing, and also even extend to the public areas of the interior where preservation and restoration is appropriate. So with that, we support this idea and look forward to hearing more about what the details of the plans include. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You've also signed up to speak on agenda item number 4, the project located at 1357 North Elston. And would you like to address that, please?
Sure. So this Elston Avenue property is the former Morton Salt warehouse that many people are familiar with from the expressway, from I-94, the Kennedy Expressway. We find this to be a really interesting landmark designation, that of an industrial building. You don't see too many of these. There are several, a few I should say, that are protected by the landmark designation, but we really want to encourage a sensitive reuse and restoration of this building. Its metal elements as well as its masonry elements on the north side of the complex. And we understand that the roof line or the roof and the iconic sign, which has been replaced before over time, is set to be replaced. And we just want to make sure that that is replaced in kind, and the graphics are also protected, as we've seen before in other cases, like the Santa Fe building, where the building is landmarked, and it's assumed that the sign, the historic Santa Fe sign, was landmarked, only to find out a few years ago that it was to be replaced by a Motorola sign. And that was very disappointing. We would not want to see advertisements for other commercial entities or advertisements in the future on this roof, or any type of LED signage. I understand that the developers are probably very committed to keeping the Morton Salt signage as it is and the Morton Salt Girl. But I think that's really important to mention all of this in our discussions over signage at Wrigley Field, for instance, which is always up for debate, as well as some of the historic signage on Michigan Avenue and in other landmark districts and attached to landmark buildings. I think it's really important to put a clause in here that, the sign is always to remain graphically as is, even if the metal material is to be replaced over time. So again, we're very supportive of this landmark district, very excited about this plan, have spoken to the developers in the past. It's been a little while, but I want to encourage this landmarking effort, but also want to make sure that what we see today is what we'll see in the future. So thank you for the opportunity to address these issues, and we look forward to your support.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. That is all the speakers who have signed up to speak in the Permit Review Committee meeting today. We'll now go through the agenda. First item is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, the regular meeting of September 3rd, 2020. Are there any comments regarding that? And if not, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Anybody? I'm sorry. Is that Commissioner Osmond? Did everybody? Okay, I'm seeing a hand.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Osmond and Commissioner Hughes was a second. And so I will do the roll call. Commissioner Geary, you approve?
Yes.
And I am Commissioner Wong, ratifying that the minutes are approved unanimously. First item on the agenda is the property located at 1810 North Wells in the Old Town Triangle District. This is in Alderman Smith's ward. This is a proposed partial demolition of an existing one-story building and construction of a three-story rooftop addition. Larry, if you could tell us about this project, please.
Commissioner, excuse me?
Yes,
I'm
Smith.
sorry. I had previously told staff that I wanted to be recognized at the outset of this matter, if I may, to make a request. Staff told me I could do that.
Okay.
You heard many passionate comments from my constituents and have received hundreds of more that I not only support, but encourage, to ask that this matter not be heard at today's meeting and that instead it be delayed. As one of my constituents very eloquently put, we have had COVID, looting, stress that has really impaired our normal community process. As you'll hear if this goes forward today, so I'll give you just a preview. There were efforts made by this commission and by the Old Town Planning, Historic Preservation and Zoning Committee. And we did in fact meet with the applicant, the commissioner, the committee, and my office to find out what this is all about, why this building could possibly be made non-contributing, and of what benefit would this be to Old Town. The commissioner strongly encouraged us to try to reach a compromise because of the staff's position that that this building could be made non-contributing. Well, so we did, putting us in kind of a Hobson's choice of either the threat of a building coming down or having some kind of an addition that was violative of everything that Old Town has stood for 42 years. This is the very first time since this district has been created that anyone has even sought to try to delist a building as being contributing. It's unprecedented. And the neighbors need to know more about it. After meeting several times on the issue, sometimes when you have talks, you can be 4 outcomes. You all agree, something comes out great. You don't agree, you reach a compromise, or you refuse to talk, or you do talk and you can't reach a compromise. And, as an alderman, we do a lot of development and we try to compromise sometimes. But after trying and trying and trying, we couldn't. However, I was duty bound because we understood the staff's position to have a community meeting and show this to people. And so we did, we had one. And because of COVID and everything else going on in the city, it was last week. And the response from my community was filled with this level of dismay that you've heard today from my constituents, and I'm so glad they're here. From many, many people wanting to understand how this possibly could happen and what the impact would be on them. So before a decision is made, we would like to implore this committee to allow us to continue our community process. We have a history of robust community engagement in the 43rd Ward. If we have a development that's a problem, we will meet over and over and over until it's resolved. And we work with city departments. We are a very engaged community. The outcome of that has been a community that has had some of the finest landmark districts in the city. And on non-landmark developments, we have better results. But our community process is far from done. And it's very, very important. I was so proud to hear my new colleague, Jeanette Taylor, say that she's a community organizer and her community helped her to get to the point to landmark the Emmett Till Mobley building. That's a magnificent milestone. A magnificent milestone. We have buildings in Old Town that have significance in so many walks of life. And this is one of them, being a stable that was originally founded by one of General Grant's clerks after he became a veterinarian. So before we begin, I know that this is unusual, a very unusual request, but for the sake of our community process, we are begging you to allow us to continue and to reschedule this hearing for the next permit review committee.
Thank you, Alderman. My understanding is that the postponing of this would have to come from the applicant. And I guess one of the questions I have for you, Alderman, could you explain to this committee how many meetings have you sat in with the commissioner, and how long ago did you start these meetings?
Oh, golly, I'd almost have to ask Joanna for my staff for the exact date. It's been 3 or 4. And we
Over the
really,
course of how many months?
over the course of many months, because it all started just in the before times. And
Okay.
then, before COVID. And in fact, the last, and I may get this right and the applicant may correct me, but one of the last meetings was just before the COVID stay-at-home order happened. And all city business shut down for a long time.
Right.
And everyone was getting up on Zoom, and we were worrying about people. And as my constituent said, people were very busy. As aldermen, we've been working 15-hour days for 6 months because people are concerned. So if the fault is partly mine, I beg your forgiveness, because honestly, food, shelter, and safety are the most important things right now. Everyone was pitching in, helping others. And also our commissioner really thought that there was a way to bring about a compromise. So we actually had more meetings as a committee than we would. And generally, we rely on our neighborhood organization. Our process has been for 50 years that we rely on our neighborhood organizations to communicate with their members about things like this before we go to big community meetings.
Right.
So, there may have been communications breakdowns. There may have been. But the point is that we have public meetings at which everybody can come. And we had over 100 people at our community meeting last week, and we really had no idea what people would think. And I always expect a certain amount of opposition at community meetings, but this was the most I've ever seen. I mean, this was a clear bellwether. And it was largely surrounding the shock of I don't get even how this happens. And frankly, I do have a question as to this committee's, and I have posed it, as to whether or not this committee, which did not set the contributing nature of this building, can even do it. I did send a letter to the commissioner, and I know they disagree with me on this. We're friends, but we can disagree. Mm-hmm. That unlike almost every other historic district in our city, when Old Town was created back in 1977, there was no list of contributing buildings. It didn't exist. Instead, a group of distinguished architects, including Walter Netsch, put together a report that was submitted to the National Register in Springfield. And that's what's guided the decision-making here in Chicago for 42 years. And so I'm very concerned whether this commission can delist something that the National Register, which is the only governing authority here, hasn't approved. So I believe we need the time to explore that issue as well. If I have to give a presentation, I'll talk all about it. But we really, the applicant is, determined. I will also say, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, that the last conversation that we just had about 2107 North Cleveland is relevant in a way. That was a one-story building on a lot that someone could sell for $1 million in our neighborhood. Yep. This is a one-story building. And of course, the developer wants to get on with it. But under all the circumstances, I believe that the commission can take the decision to either delay this procedure today or say, this is interestingly enough that we're going to refer it to the entire Landmark Commission instead of just the PRC. So I'm making this extraordinary ask on behalf of my community. We know how supportive this commission is of landmarking in neighborhoods. We're the old experienced ones in that effort, and we really need more time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, Alderman. There's a couple things. I wanted to get a couple things. One of them, I asked you this question mainly to understand what that public engagement process was like, and from what I understand, what you just said was that there were a number of committee members that were also were sitting in those meetings for months. I also understand that the developers had this property for well, at least a few years now, and has been, trying to get move this along.
Well, he is a contract purchaser, sir.
And so I don't, quite frankly, I don't understand where, unless there's a real reason why anything is going to change between now and 30 days from now. Quite frankly, I mean, we're pretty clear as to where your constituency stands on this matter, and I think that you understand that as well.
Well, they want to understand what this means.
Well, okay.
These decisions don't take place in a vacuum, and
Right.
they want to have meetings.
So,
they would like to have engagement with the Landmarks Commission staff.
I think this committee would like to hear where how this is, so that we can talk about it as well, and understand where this is going. I'd like to proceed then with the staff presentation on this, and move forward with this. If the committee then feels that this is in question, we will request of the applicant whether they want to defer this or not. But as of right now, I think we'd like to hear what the staff has to say about it. Please.
Thank you. So we'll continue our request afterwards. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Larry, if you could make the presentation, please.
Sure. So the property proposed for redevelopment contains 4 buildings, including a 1-story garage at 1810 North Wells, a 3-story mixed-use building at 1816 to 1818 North Wells, with a 2-story coach house at the rear, and a 2-story mixed-use building at 1820 North Wells. The parcel is approximately 150 feet deep, with 80 feet of frontage along Wells. Staff was initially advised of a pending submittal for this property in March of 2019. An initial design submittal was received in June of 2019. Staff provided comments and recommendations. In the months that followed, several meetings were held with historic preservation staff, including meetings with Commissioner Cox, Alderman Smith, and representatives of the Old Town Triangle Association. During those meetings, extensive discussion occurred regarding the character of the building at 1810, as well as various design approaches. Various revised submittals were received in response to these meetings, and I believe the most recent of those submittals was received in September last month. The applicant proposes a project which will incorporate several existing buildings into a mixed-use development. The 2 buildings on the north end of the project will be retained, repaired, and renovated. A 2-story coach house at the rear of the middle building will also be retained and incorporated into the development. The applicant proposes to retain the exterior walls of the 1-story garage at 1810 North Wells and construct a 3-story contemporary rooftop addition with varying setbacks. Because the proposed 3-story rooftop addition at 1810 North Wells impacts the roofline and massing of the building, the Commission must determine whether the existing 1-story structure is contributing or non-contributing to the district. Constructing floor additions may adversely impact designated roof lines and would not typically be recommended for a contributing structure. Should the building be determined non-contributing, it may be modified with greater latitude, provided such modifications are found to be compatible with the district. Contributing and non-contributing determinations are made on a case-by-case basis and do not affect any other buildings within the district. Likewise, they do not establish any precedents which would allow for floor additions or roofline alterations to other historic buildings within the district. A determination of whether a building is contributing or non-contributing to the district requires a level of research and analysis not generally included in a designation report, and the Historic Preservation Ordinance provides guidance in making this finding. So here you can see the criteria outlined by the Historic Preservation Ordinance, criteria 1 through 6, noting the aspects of the district which development would need to observe in order to be considered contributing. So rather than read through these, we will go through them one by one. So let's go to that next slide. Criteria 1 states that the subject property exhibits the general historic and architectural features described in the Designation Ordinance. The Landmark Designation Ordinance for the Old Town Triangle states the following. The Old Town Triangle District contains many fine examples of the architectural styles that were important in Chicago after the fire of 1871. Persons important to Chicago and American history have lived in the district. Many of the homes in the district are typical of the urban housing that characterized American cities in the late 19th century. Flat or bay-fronted, tall and narrow in proportion, and usually 2 or 3 stories tall. The Old Town Triangle District contains many excellent examples of the architectural styles that were popular in Chicago during the latter part of the 19th century, such as the Italianate and Greek Revival ornamental styles, the Queen Anne style, and Chicago cottages. As described in detail in the Old Town Triangle District Designation Ordinance and Report, and as previously found by the Commission, the period of historic development of the district is from Chicago's rapid period of development before the fire of 1871 to 1929 at the beginning of the Great Depression. City records indicate that a 2-story livery stable was permitted on the site in 1883. Robinson's Atlas shows that a brick stable building was on the site in 1886, and Rosher's Atlas shows a 2-story building in 1892. Sanborn Fire Insurance maps confirm a 28-foot tall, 2-story building in 1910 and 1935. 2 permits were issued in 1940, one for demolition and a second permit for construction of a new roof and repairs. It appears that only the second floor was demolished, and a 1950 Sanborn map shows a 14-foot tall, 1-story building at 1810 North Wells. Sometime after the demolition of the second floor and construction of the new roof structure, the face brick on the front facade was replaced with a newer brick. Because these substantial changes occurred after 1929, including the removal of the second floor, new roof, and new front facade, the current appearance of the building does not reflect the characteristics intended to be preserved by the district designation and cannot be considered significant. Criteria 2 notes that the subject property exhibits the general historic and architectural characteristics associated with the district. Historic buildings located within the boundaries of the Old Town Triangle District include many examples of architectural styles that were important in Chicago after the fire of 1871, such as the Italianate and Greek Revival ornamental styles, the Queen Anne style, as well as Chicago cottages. The general architectural characteristics of the historic buildings in the district include bracketed cornices, double-hung windows, ornamental metalwork and/or woodwork, stone accents, and raised front stoops. The subject property does not exhibit the typical architectural features associated with this district. Criteria 3 is that the subject property respects the general site characteristics associated with the district. The subject property maintains the street wall along Wells with narrow gangways and alley access. Although the residential buildings within the district exhibit a variety of setbacks, the historic mixed-use buildings along Wells typically come up to the front property line. Let's go to the next slide if we could. Oh, here we are. Criteria 5 is that the subject property exhibits the general size, shape, and scale associated with the district. The 1-story height of the building is not as typical as 2 and 4 and 3-story buildings, which of course is what the building was originally before that second story was removed. Criteria number 5 notes that the materials of the subject property are compatible with the district in general character, color, and texture. The subject building is face brick with concrete sills and coping, which was installed likely in the 1980s. The secondary elevations are common brick. Criteria number 6 notes that if the subject property has been altered in a manner which is contrary to these criteria, such changes could be easily reversed or removed. Synthetic siding, dormers, and porch enclosures shall be deemed easily reversed or removed. Based on permit research, the building lost its second floor, original roof, and possibly other changes in 1940. At that point, the height of the building changed from 28 feet to 14 feet, is documented in the fire insurance maps. Based on physical investigation, any remaining historic brick on the front facade was removed and replaced with modern brick. No documentation, such as drawings or photographs, can be identified which illustrates the original architectural character of the building, such as the design of the second floor, the shape and massing of the roof, or the design of the original front facade. These alterations are substantial and are not easily reversed or removed. Given the above analysis and criteria, staff recommends that the committee find that the subject building is non-contributing to the Old Town Triangle District and recommends approval of the partial demolition, including removal of the non-historic roof. So, as part of the review of the project with staff and community representatives over several months, the applicant has revised the proposal to now include the retention of the exterior walls of the existing one-story building. The applicant proposes to remove most of the non-historic roof shown here in red and retain the existing exterior walls shown in light purple. These walls are proposed to be repaired and incorporated into the expanded structure. The demolition proposed is less than 40%, which does not require City Council approval. So we are now moving on to the review of the actual project, and we have criteria to evaluate that as well. The first is that the new structure exhibits the general size, shape, and scale of the features associated with the property or district. The 1800 block of North Wells is a commercial street in the Old Town Triangle District and contains residential as well as mixed-use buildings. The height of the existing historic buildings within the boundary of the district range from 2 stories, or 52 feet, to 3 stories, or 64 feet. The proposed 3-story rooftop addition results in a height of 64 feet, which matches the height of the adjacent historic building to the north. Criteria B notes that the site plan exhibits the general site characteristics associated with the property or district. The historic mixed-use buildings on North Wells are typically built right up to the front property line with 0 side yards, which is illustrated by the buildings to the north. The adjacent residential buildings to the south do have front yard setbacks. Because the existing 1-story building is to be retained, those site characteristics will be maintained. The next slide it's just sort of a zoom in on the streetscape to show the existing and the proposed in a little bit greater detail. So let's go to the following slide. The second and third floors are set back from the front facade a distance of 16 feet. This allows those floors to align with the 3-story facade of the building to the south. The 4th floor is set back an additional 10 feet, allowing it to align with the 4th floor of the building to the south. Each setback allows for a rooftop deck. On the 4th floor, the visibility of this deck is minimized through the use of glass safety railings. The setbacks and design clearly differentiate the new construction from the historic development on the block, and staff does recommend that they are compatible in overall scale and configuration. Criteria C is that the design respects the general historic and architectural characteristics associated with the property or district in general character, color, and texture. The rooftop addition utilizes metal piers and spandrels to organize bands of windows. The primary vertical piers are designed to align with the masonry piers of the 1-story building below, which is intended to be repaired and incorporate new compatible storefronts. While the windows do not replicate historic configurations, they do relate to the vertical orientation and proportions found within the district. Criteria D relates to the materials, that they should be compatible with the existing structure in the district in general character, color, and texture. The materials proposed for the addition are glass and metal. Although both have historic precedent within the district, they are used in a much more contemporary manner, varying in their solid to void relationship. The applicant suggests that the proposed facade is compatible with the historic steel casement windows found in the district on rear and side elevations for more utilitarian structures. Staff recommends that color samples for the proposed metal mullions and cladding, which shall have a dark, non-reflective appearance, be provided for review and approval prior to order and installation. As proposed, masonry repairs may be made to the existing one-story building, and staff shall review and approve any masonry replacement samples prior to order and installation. The applicant has provided additional exhibits to further illustrate the character of the proposed development. I included this map because I wanted to show where this project is located as it relates to the overall size and shape of the district. And it really is on sort of the eastern edge of the district. The buildings across the street are not within the district, and many of them have a varying scale from what you find in the historic areas. So in addition to these graphics, the applicant also provided some sort of bird's eye renderings of how this building relates to the entire block and its immediate neighbors, and to show and to kind of illustrate how the scale of the development is compatible to those existing buildings. Let's go to the next one. Now this won't actually be particularly visible from outside of the project, but the applicant also provided some rendering showing how they intend to use the interior court between those buildings and the rear coach house. Okay, so let's go to the final slide. We are recommending approval of this, and we're recommending approval in two parts. One that relates to the proposed partial demolition, and I'll read that because it's pretty important. One, we're recommending that the commission preliminarily find that the property at 1810 North Wells, a one-story commercial building, is non-contributing to the character of the Old Town Triangle District, and its partial demolition will not be an adverse effect on the character of the landmark district. And two, preliminarily find that the amount of demolition proposed for the project, based on the submitted information, does not trigger the requirements of section 2-120-825 governing the demolition of 40% or more of landmark buildings. Now we're moving on to the second part of our recommendation, which relate to the proposed rooftop addition. We are recommending that the commission find that the proposed project with the following conditions meet the criteria set forth in the commission's rules and regulations, the commission's guidelines for alterations of historic buildings and new construction, and therefore that the project will not have an adverse effect on the significant historical and architectural features of the district, and approve the project with the following conditions. A, that a report by a licensed structural engineer addressing how the existing facade and walls to remain shall be supported, braced, and protected in situ during the demolition of the existing roof and interior structure, and the excavation and new construction shall be included with the permit application. The recommended measures, sequencing, and protections shall be incorporated into the structural and architectural permit drawings. B, should unforeseen conditions in the field result in a need to demolish more of the existing one-story building at 1810 North Wells than currently proposed, for example, exceeding 40%, the applicant shall notify historic preservation staff immediately, noting that demolition of 40% or more of the existing structure will require further review of the commission and the city council. C, dimension details of all new windows, facades, and storefronts shall be submitted with the permit plans. And D, color samples of all new facade cladding and mullions shall be submitted to historic preservation staff for review and approval prior to order and installation. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to address questions from the commission, and clearly the applicant is here as well, and of course the alderman, and I believe both have their own presentations which they would like to share.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Does the committee have any questions of Larry at this time? And I'm going to ask you, it's difficult for me to see if you're raising your hand. Okay, well, not really. I've figured this out. I'm doing this on my phone and I'm not used to it. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Commissioner Wong. Larry, you know, I've read all of the letters and I've listened. You said something that was very enlightening during your presentation that I would like for you to reiterate, please, just for everyone's knowledge. Can you again emphasize what contributing and non-contributing means and how this is a case-by-case basis, so it doesn't set a precedent for, you know, buildings and, you know, more future construction after? Can you please just, you said it so much more eloquently.
Well, I'll try to paraphrase as best I can. So when historic districts are established, obviously the goal is to include a concentration of historic buildings as complete as possible. Every historic district does contain buildings which are not historic, or buildings which may have been historic originally, but have been altered so much that they no longer tell the story of that particular district. In the way that our ordinance works is when we recommend a district, we typically suggest which buildings are contributing and which buildings are not. I should say that the recent designations include that, and as the Alderman mentioned, the older designations don't really give the same attention. However, even with the more recent designations, that recommendation is only a recommendation. It's based on the information that we were able to identify when the district was designated. And if someone were to come to us with a proposal that, and they needed to make a case that something was contributing or non-contributing, rather, they would have the opportunity to do that, and the commission would still need to weigh in and determine whether such building would in fact be contributing or non-contributing. And that's a process we do for every building within a district. Even if it was constructed last year and we've had some more recent demolitions, we still need to go through this process where we analyze what the ordinance requires us to do and how it relates to those particular buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Does anybody else have any questions at this time?
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you, Larry. This was a very, can you hear me?
Yes,
I can.
Commissioner
Okay.
Gary.
This was a very thorough presentation. So, you know, once you walk through all these materials, it's very clear what is the decision-making process in terms of the ordinance. I wonder, like, if residents have had the opportunity to see this. I know the town halls are the avenue for making this information available. I'm just wondering in the interaction of the preservation staff department, the DPD department, and Alderwoman Smith's constituents. So I'm just curious, like, how much of this is known by the residents so they understand better, or if this is the only public forum for them to access this information, because it's very compelling. So I'm just wondering, what are the level of information that it's presented to the residents?
So I can tell you that we participated in several meetings. The first, I think that it included representatives of Old Town and the alderman and the commissioner, I believe was in March. We really don't know how community groups choose to share the information that they gather with the larger group. So although our assumption was that, you know, the information that the smaller group was receiving was getting out into the larger community, like I said, community groups are really independent bodies. We don't always know how they operate. Their purpose is to provide advisory input to the commission, because obviously the commission is the body that makes the final determination based on the law, which is basically what our ordinance is. So I think if you're asking how many meetings there were, I believe the applicant has a better list of exactly how many meetings occurred and when and who they involved. And I'm sure they'd be happy to run through that with you.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Gary?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
You know, I'm just reflecting because the Department of Planning is very active right now in other projects and multiple projects, and they're having like a very strong presence in neighborhoods to make the case for redevelopment. And I'm just trying to understand, you know, how preservation has a very different way of operating. I think I'm just reflecting out loud on like how different those kind of dynamics are, and you know, seeing the impact and the conversations that are being brought forward before the commission.
I may, you know, if I could add to that though, this particular community, because of its advocacy of its landmark district, quite frankly, is very astute and very aware of pretty much everything that goes on within the Landmarks Commission, within our commission, as well as the ordinance itself. So, I mean, it's a very, very passionate group, and they want to, you know, they want to know what's going on in the world of preservation. So, I just wanted to, Larry, I had a question for you. I just wanted to clarify. The original building, it was a 2-story building. And currently what is now existing is a 1-story building, of which the entire facade of this building is new, if you will. So that's number one. Number two is that if this is deemed non-contributing, the applicant has the ability then to demolish the entire building. Is that correct?
That would be correct. And in fact, that was, I believe that may have been the original intent, but based on the input that they received from the community, they modified their proposal to try and retain as much of that building as they could. Initially, I believe they were going to reconstruct it. Then, based on various input, they found a way to save as much as possible. So you're right, non-contributing means that it could be replaced, and that's not the proposal here today.
Okay. I just want to be clear about that. Alderman Smith, I do see your name up, your hand up. I actually, what I'd like to do, I want to go through our committee first. Commissioner Osmond. Commissioner Osmond.
Yes, a couple of things here is that I'd like to understand, is the challenge with the neighborhood the fact that it could be non-contributing? Is that the isolated incident? Because when you look at the way this building is being redeveloped, it's contextual, it's sensitive to the neighborhood, it's got similar scope and feel. And so is it just that it's this one issue of non-contributing? And could the developer then, once we finish a meeting, decide that I'm going to pull out this non-contributing factor and I'm going to change the whole development? Can they be separated?
So if that were to happen, that would be a new project, and we would review it afresh, and we would take it back to the Permit Review Committee.
That answers your question, Commissioner.
Yes, I mean, like Commissioner Guerri, is that, you know, it is that I found interesting was that it was the 1950s, and what you said, Commissioner Wong, it's 1950s were the changes, that, you know, it was a 2-story building, the brick was changed, so that's what I'm trying to get my head around. What exactly is the issue that the community is objecting to right now?
Okay, we'll have an opportunity to have Alderman Smith address that in a second. Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah, my last comment here is From my understanding from the presentation, that older districts that became landmarked, there's a gray area in exactly what buildings in that district are landmarked. So, you know, I would encourage Alderman Smith and her community and constituents to maybe propose exactly which buildings within the district they want to be deemed historic, because I understand the concern of the community, and I understand where the gray area is now with older districts versus how we do it now with newer districts. And now I've learned, you know, in the last year that there are specific buildings, groupings of buildings that we can put together that becomes a district. You know, I think it's probably unfeasible to say every single building in that large area that Larry had outlined is contributing. I don't think that's probably feasible. So I think within that, understanding exactly which structures could be a next step for that community.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Alderman, I'm going to hold off on you just for a second, because what I'd like to do is have the applicant speak, and I will get back with you once the applicant has completed their presentation.
Thank you.
Therefore, Mr. Weiner, I believe you are here, and is there a statement you'd like to make? You had your hand up. It's your opportunity here, sir. Mr. Weiner. Hello. Mr. Weiner.
I think he dropped out of the meeting.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, this is Katrina McGuire, counsel for the developer. He just texted that he got thrown off. He's trying to log back in.
okay. Katrina, would you be able to start while Mr. Weiner is logging back in, or would you like us to wait?
I don't mind starting if you want to try. I'm just going to make sure he's trying to log back in here. These are always the challenges with these. I appreciate your patience.
Katrina, I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so, and if not, I'm going to ask you to at least try to make the case here.
Yeah, no, understood. Is the presentation, Larry, that Howard said, was Howard? There we go. Okay.
Tech support, Mr. Howard can also call in from his phone, so at least we'll get his audio.
Yeah. All right, tech support, if you can let me know if he does join in, and he can then chime in as necessary. Thank you, members of the commission. And thank you also, Alderman Smith. I did want to, at the very outset, I know that this is a matter of controversy in the neighborhood. We certainly acknowledge that. However, we did want to sort of make it clear on the record that we have been in this process with the community since last July. Initially, Old Town Triangle Association, who we were directed to meet with, was unwilling to meet with us. That changed finally. We did start meetings with them, their committee membership back in November of 2019. And we do thank them for their time and engagement as well. Throughout this process, we have looked at probably a dozen different iterations for this site. We did start out, talking to staff and trying to understand where this, what the status of this building was. which then resulted in sort of that report that started to sort of tell the story of the alterations and how this building appeared to lack sort of sufficient integrity to maintain its contributing status. It became very clear early on that sort of a full demolition certainly was going to be something that the community did not want. And we looked at versions that included both essentially rebuilding, tearing down entirely, rebuilding the facade to make it look as it did before, so in its true original fashion. And then also iterations that involved just new construction throughout. What ultimately then occurred was, as mentioned, was that there were meetings then that were amongst all the stakeholders. It was staff, it was Alderman Smith, it was members of the OTTA committee, and Commissioner Cox, really in an effort to reach some sort of a compromise here. Those happened, I think the first one was in February, and then the last one was directly pre-COVID. Subsequent to that, and very quickly after that, the developer did start to look at sort of the compromise solution that's here before this committee today. And that's how we've been sort of talking about this, that this is the compromise solution that allows the maintenance of the facade. It's essentially all four walls of the building are being preserved in their existing form with the addition. And that was really an effort to sort of work with the community and address those concerns by maintaining this structure and building this addition that was going to be from a height-wise contextual as well. Beyond that, if there's any specific questions about the details of the meetings or the number of meetings, we do have a slide here in the presentation that does talk about those. There's also, because I can't advance it, I don't know if somebody else can advance the presentation for me.
Mr. Weiser.
I'm available as well if you'd like.
Okay. So, I don't know that you necessarily want or need to hear, the entirety of this, but I think that what we wanted to sort of convey was all the efforts that were made and the various iterations to reach some sort of a compromise here, understanding that the current status and the condition of the building was what it was, and sort of reiterating, Mr. Shore's comment here, which the committee certainly knows that each building is going to be looked at independently and individually as these circumstances may arise.
Thank you.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Mr. Chairman, if there was any specific questions.
No. Who was that was just speaking?
Oh, Howard Weiner.
Oh, Howard, go ahead.
So if we could go to the next slide, I can, out of respect to the committee, and we'll go through this fairly quickly. There are a couple of key slides. Part of what we're hoping to do as we presented was actually improve the facade of the existing buildings. By doing the addition, we get to eliminate this fire escape, which is on the front of the 1816-18 building, greatly enhancing the facade and the approach to Old Town. Next slide, please. Everything we did was within the existing zoning and stayed well below it because we wanted to be respectful of the neighborhood. The most obvious is while 45 units could have been permitted, we're only proposing 18. And staying within the heights of the existing buildings. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This goes into a little bit of detail about all of the various meetings that we had and who attended. As Larry mentioned, we started with landmarks just to see if it was feasible that this building could be considered non-contributing, and together we did research. In June, we went to the Old Town Triangle, asked for a meeting. They initially said they didn't want to meet, and then finally we were able to get a meeting in July. We then had not one, not two, but 3 meetings with members of the Old Town Historic Preservation and Zoning Committee, the Commissioner, and the Alderman. And those meetings took place in January, March, and May. After each meeting, we were asked to submit or to make modifications to our plan and resubmit them. And we resubmitted them not only to landmarks and not only to the Alderman, but also to the Old Town Triangle. So they have been pretty aware of exactly what's planned for the last 15 months. And then in August, we met with Alderman Smith. We had a community meeting that Alderman Smith has already spoken about in September, and now we're here today. Next slide, please. As Katrina mentioned, we went through probably over 100 iterations trying to find a compromise. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And as you can see, I mean, when we talk about context, and I think Larry commented on this better than I could. Interestingly enough, it's the one-story building that's out of character. Next slide, please. We were very respectful of all the existing setbacks, limited the height of our new building to the adjacent buildings, matched cornice lines, all at the suggestion of the commissioner, as well as landmarks, as well as some of the people that were in the meeting with Old Town Triangle. Next slide, please. So that's where we end up. And that kind of ended my presentation. Katrina probably said it best. We are preserving all four walls of this property at tremendous expense out of respect and deference to the neighborhood. Thank you for your time, commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Weiner. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant? And just 1 second. I get to, oh, lots of folks. Commissioner Hughes, go ahead.
I want to be quick here and respectful of time, and just thank the owner and the owner's reps for clarifying the process. I think that's actually really helpful for us to understand. And gosh, there's a lot of iterations put up. You guys must have, designed and redesigned and redesigned again. So it's very, very helpful and very clear in the presentation too that you respected the existing context. And this property is across the street from a high rise. So, like you said, you could have went 45 units and it still would technically be in context with the buildings across the street, but you were very respectful of the immediate context and the property lines, the facade lines, the details, even the materials that you chose, respect the existing context bordering this property. So thank you so much for clarifying.
Thank you, Commissioner. We sure tried.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to, of the applicant, I'm going to go back to Alderman Smith. You've had your hand up for a long time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was still up. Could I please have my slides put up, please? And I'd like to thank the commission for meeting. And I would also like to encourage you to please reserve judgment for a few more minutes, because I do have to make some immediate responses to a couple questions. Commissioner Osmond, you asked, what's the objection to this? This is the first proposal ever being heard by the Landmark Commission to put an addition on a building in the Old Town Triangle that is visible from the street. It's been 42 years. It's never been done for reasons which I'll get to in here. It is also, to Ms. Hughes' question, you asked, oh, I understand in these older buildings, in these older districts, that you couldn't possibly have characterized every building. This community did. In 1982, it cataloged over 500 buildings and determined whether they should be contributing, significant, non-contributing, or not in the period. And that's part of this presentation. And with regard to the meetings, we have felt when we were talking that we had a gun to our head. I want you to know, and I work with landmarks all the time, and this is the first time this has happened. Today, I, the alderman, am hearing for the first time some of the results of this evaluation. When we had our meetings, we were trying to be in good faith to understand, but we were never told, other than there's been alterations, why by the staff even thought this was non-contributing. So frankly, we did have a lot of meetings because the commissioner really wanted us to come to a compromise. So the Old Town Triangle has a little something of a reputation. And my very last slide is going to address it. There passionate about preservation because without that passion, it wouldn't have been preserved. I'll tell you at the outset of this conversation that I come by my own preservation bona fides passionately and honestly. Members of my family have been involved very much in preservation, including the rehabilitation of the Field Museum, Buckingham Fountain, Union Station in Washington, and even the Mormon Tabernacle. So my family has a lot of professional, not me personally, professional experience in this field, and we're very committed to it. And my ward has one of the highest number of landmark districts in the city of Chicago, and this was the leader. So because I think the other reason why we had so many meetings is because this is indeed the first time in our community's 42-year history that, notwithstanding our cataloging, that this is being asked. But first, I know that some of you aren't that familiar with this landmark district. This is the entrance to the district, which is 2 buildings over from the building that is being proposed here today. So change slide. First, I'd like to give a little history. Slide. Old Town was largely settled by German immigrants in the 1850s and 60s. They were small farmers, laborers, factory workers. They were largely German Catholics, and they quickly built a community with St. Michael's Church in it, which was built in 1870. Next slide. And then it all burned down. This is at North Avenue, just at the very far edge of the city in 1871. And this is St. Michael's Church after it burned down in the fire, along with the entire rest of the community. Immediately after the fire, please, next slide. This area was rebuilt fast. Residents built small frame houses that were outlawed as fire hazards only 3 years later. But then in the city's boomtime, brick buildings of many types were built in later 1880s, 1910. Now, I hope you'll excuse this next paragraph. It was written in 1967 about our district. Who was there? The past checkered with disasters. Its residents a marbled polyglot population of German, Irish, Italian, Negroes, Hungarians, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, everyone. And its architecture, a kaleidoscope of Victorian overindulgence and dyspepsia, because this is an exuberant district and very unique for the number of styles in it. So why was Old Town landmarked? Next slide. This is what was written by the then Commissioner of Planning and Development in February 1976 by the head of DPD. It was a typical Chicago middle-class neighborhood of small residence apartments and commercial structures, predominantly turn-of-the-century character and scale. And why were we looking for a district? So that additional assurance to the area's continued sympathetic development. Next slide. And why was that necessary? Because of this. What you're looking at is a view of the Old Town district fronted by Larrabee Street and many other streets which were completely demolished by mass urban renewal in the 70s. And Old Town, the entire Lincoln Park community, was supposed to be significantly torn down. And the neighbors of Old Town, who had been organizing since the 40s, to begin to restore these small, as you can see, there's nothing taller than that church, banded together and got this declared, this 500 building area, one of the first Chicago landmarks. And it was done by an earlier generation of artists, activists, and architects who lived in the area. And it stopped it from being destroyed. But as Larry noted, and as you understand, when landmarking was newer, it was a whole area, and generally there wasn't a list, and indeed there is no list. So our residents, next slide, got together and I hope you can see the whole slide. This is the committee that put together a project to register all the buildings with the National Register. And let me point out, Diane Gonzalez, you heard from, she was one of the younger members. But instead, we also had Don McDonald of Perkins and Will, Walter Netsch of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, Kevin Searing of Harry Wiesen Associations, and Tom Welch of Halliburton and Root. This was not a bunch of rank amateurs judging these buildings. These were some of the best architects in the city at the time, and they were very, very concerned about preserving Old Town. At the same time, some of them built their first mid-century buildings in this area, in areas that were wrecked, including Harry Wies, Walter Netsch, who lived there, Bruce Graham. They believed in this preservation. So in the materials that are on the drive that was sent to you is the National Register nomination papers, which shows the cataloging of every single building in this district. So next slide. So this is just a point I want to bring to you, which is that of the 500, this was what was brought to the state of Illinois Historic Resources Office, which was responsible for the National Register determinations. This district was created September 28th, 1977, 43 years ago this week. As Larry told you, there weren't lists. Instead, as you'll see right here, 198 were designated significant, including rear dwellings, including garages, which we'll get to. Another 225 were listed as contributing, and 19 were non-contributing, and then there were 35 built later. Next slide.
Alderman, do you have?
I have a few more slides. I'm getting through it.
Okay.
I'm getting through it, but it's,
Thank you.
You know,
I got it.
You know, thank you. So on the right is the actual list that was come up by this, and in questioning whether or not alterations were of an issue, alterations were made from 1873 to 1977, and those were cataloged as well. And you can see that the committee made notes considering the kinds of changes that were made, and coding for every single kind of change that was made. And as a result, pristine buildings were identified as significant. Buildings with alterations were identified as contributing an additional 256 buildings. That's why this community is worried. Next slide. This is a map from the time showing the placement of every single building. And all you need to know from this slide is that half the properties in Old Town are significant and they're marked with little dots, and half are contributing, the same category as 1810. Next slide. 1810 North Wells is listed on that list as contributing and verified by the National Register of Historic Places, as is almost every stable or garage structure in Old Town, which are all contributing. The earliest photograph we have is from 1970, and it still has the same frontage as it does today. As you may have heard during the comment period, it was built in 1883 as a livery stable, and that's very important, and hold on for why. The stable eventually became a car garage, which was also very important to Old Town and is part of the culture of our area. And it has served as a place for cars or transportation for 133 years. So who cares about garages? Next slide. Well, it's a key part of its historic designation. This was an area where the help lived. New houses were interspersed with garages for living quarters for chauffeurs employed by people on the Gold Coast. Then, as now, you could not park in the Gold Coast. So people stabled their carriages and horses and their chauffeurs often lived above the store, and not always, but not always. And many of those garages have been converted. Next page. Here's the garages of Old Town and Stables. Here's how many there are. Here are just 3 pictures of ones that still exist, because all these exist. Some of them are used as garages. Some have been converted into homes, like the one in the middle. The one in the middle was obviously a stable and then a garage for a wealthy family. The one on the right, not so. And the one over there on the left is now a preschool, a big open space. So I was shocked to hear Larry say that this is not consistent with the architecture or uses of the area. This is the area. This is a key and incredible part, and why tourists come to Old Town every day, is to take these tours to see what life was like 100 years ago. Next slide. James Peters, having heard of this, unsolicited, gave this opinion. James Peters was the deputy commissioner, senior planner for the city of Chicago from 1990 to 2000. The director of landmarks and area of central planning. He was then president, executive director of Landmarks Illinois, and was its executive director for 3 years. James has been involved with the Old Town Landmark District for decades. And he says that the exact set of things that have been characterized as non-contributing are indeed contributing and are enough. So there is a substantial disagreement about whether or not, by professionals of tremendous experience who disagree about this designation. And we want more time to let those, he has not been invited to meet with Landmark. We just got this. Next slide. So of course there was this slide I'm just putting out there. Of course it's been a garage for 100 years. It's been 133 years. And all these changes that are on these maps were known by the committee in 1977. So indeed, there is not one change that has occurred to this building that was not known at the time it was designated contributing. So let's understand what contributing means in Old Town. Many buildings in Old Town have had substantial alterations, not just the kind that Larry commented on. Next slide. Here's 325 Menominee. There's what it was only a few years ago. And it's been listed as contributing. This next middle picture is what happens to it when you start unveiling what is there. And this is what it became. All worked on by this landmark staff and the Old Town Triangle Association, which approves dozens and dozens of applications every year to try to create beauty and bringing back of historic integrity like this. I'll just bring out one more. Next slide. Next slide. Now this building is particularly important because on the left is what it looked like. And this is what happened after they started tearing off the front. And this is how it ended up, where it won a Chicago Landmarks Award in 2017. Now you look at that building, it looks awful different, doesn't it? And here's why. Next slide. I want to show you a comparison of the pre-existing conditions at the time that this building got its building permits from this commission, and what was found and what kind of alterations are typical in our district. Non-historic vertical boarding, historic clapboard was revealed, not even known. During construction, they found previous alterations, including that a porch structure had existed, not even known. And the building owner worked with the Old Town Triangle Association and this commission to get that building in that shape, put that porch back, and it won the Landmarks Award. Now let's compare it to the state of this building, and every quote in here is from the structural engineer, from the applicant's engineering study. He found the original common brick masonry backup. Well, just like the historic clapboard. He found the original orange-faced brick. He found that Yes, the sections were demolished. Everyone knew that. The roof was replaced, and the front of the building was likely reclad in new brick, just like what happened on this building. And he also said that the existing front bricker is not new. It's likely from the 40s. So in other words, there is not one change that was made to this building that was not known at the time that this building was declared contributing by the only party that could make that finding at the time, which is the National Register of Historic Places. So I appreciate that people can come back and say that something's happened, but the truth is nothing's happened. Next page. So that is why I'm saying, with some frankness, that the applicant's report, nor the report of this commission, did not change the contributing nature of 1810 North Wales. It is actually no different than over 200 structures in the district today. Now, I will say, I don't know offhand how many of those have already been restored, but the kind of work that goes into our district to prop buildings up, to support them, to put up 2x4s and structures so they stay up while they are restored lovingly. So when I understand, I sometimes tell people things are one at a time as well. I'm an alderman. When I say it, I know it's with confidence that that is true, because as alderman, when someone wants to develop something, I do have some power over it, but I don't have power over landmarking. And the truth is that there are buildings today that are every bit as altered as this one. And what will happen? Next slide. I do want to raise this technical issue, which is that, as Larry said and is well known, there was no list when this area was designated. It was done by the National Register of Historic Places. The Chicago Landmarks Commission has never made an independent determination of whether a building is contributing. It makes it sound like you want us to completely redo what was done in 1984. Why? The buildings are in the same condition or restored. Indeed, next slide. The over 175-page report, which is attached to the drive, and if you haven't looked at it, I ask that we delay until you have a chance, because there's pictures, not of every building, every significant building, but there's lists and diagrams of every single building. This was prepared by the Old Town Triangle Historic District Committee, made up of the architects that we showed you, signed off by the state of Illinois. And there has been one other attempt that we're aware of. Next slide. To designate, to change a building back. Oh, and excuse me. Under the Federal Register, under the federal rules, we believe that in this unusual circumstance, that this declaration that a building is non-contributing really needs to go to the place that gave it that designation, the State Historic Preservation Officer. Now, we know that every day in my neighborhood, buildings that are with the National Register are torn down. Sure they are, in the Sheffield Neighbors area where there is no historic district. But here, and this is a really weird circumstance, because it's only a few districts to which this situation applies. Here, there is no listing. So if the Chicago committee can, on the basis of its own analysis, without considering or frankly seeking the input of Old Town, which it did not, I will say that again, while this was pending, the Chicago committee, the Chicago landmark staff never asked me or the Old Town Association to directly feed back on whether or not this was non-contributing. Instead, we were told that the staff believed that it was non-contributing. That's not a good process, but it's also, in this case, really not right when they've never made the determination to begin with. So there was an example, and I'm going to just quickly show you that. and then we'll go on. Next slide. So in 2003, also in your folders, is an example of this happening. So there's a guy in the neighborhood named Bill Barry. He owns a building in 2000, or he bought a building. In 2003, he was told that this building was contributing. So he wrote to the Washington keeper of the records about he thinks that it's not contributing, and here's his reason why. So a lot of reasons. He thought that the period wasn't right and a bunch of stuff. So now let's get the response of the keeper of records, the National. Essentially, in this case, maybe not other cases, the reason that this man, who is an architect and a very well-schooled one, is that this is the source of the contributing listings for this district. It is the National Register, even though it's not that way for other people. And the head of the National Register, oh wait, next slide, please. Here's the National Register response from the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places. If you believe the information about this house is erroneous, or that the building has lost the historical integrity needed to contribute to the significance of the district, you may pursue a formal amendment to the record by providing the evidence to support your requested corrections. That agency is the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency. Now, if you read more details of this letter, it says, well, this was listed as being built in the period 1872 to 1928 and building in 1874 with alterations in 1891. That's the evidence that was given to them by this committee that was never asked for in this process. This is why we want the delay. Next. This is why we really do believe that even if this committee, and I mean this with all respect because I work with you all every day and respect you, but I do think we're in error and need another chance or another decision. I believe this would be an arbitrary decision because it flies in the face of all the evidence that created it to begin with. Next, and indeed, what here, go back just 1 second. The things that are in these bullet points are the criteria from the rules of this commission. That a property that is significant is eligible if it retains the essential physical features. And further, even if the exterior is covered by non-historic materials, if it retains its form, feature, everything, details, they're not obscured, and they're not. And they can be restored because we do it every day. The features are not obscured because the building retained its historic shape. And further, it's important for the criteria not only of architecture, but of the culture and the business of Old Town, which was livery for very many parts, large parts of it. Next slide.
Well, Alderman, I need you to wrap this up, please.
This is my last couple slides. Okay. And we haven't had this hearing, and I appreciate this, but my community and I will be heard. We have to be heard, and I'm sorry. And then finally, that very lovely question was asked. Well, what's wrong with this? It kind of is in context. Well, that may be the thinking of how things are done in older neighborhoods today. But the rules that were govern Old Town were the city's guidelines for alterations to historic buildings and new construction in 1992. And these standards still govern the triangle. A visible addition has never been approved in Old Town. Additions will only be allowed if they do not alter, change, obscure, damage, or destroy any significant features of the landmark district. And that's what's happening here. Next slide. I'm going to contrast that to some of your newer work, which I applaud because everyone in the newer side landmark district didn't know for 200 years that they couldn't do these things with their property. Whereas everyone in Old Town has known it for 43 years at least. So visible additions, when visible additions are okay, it says it right there. Nothing like this is in the designation report, nor the rules that govern additions in Old Town. Next slide, I'm almost done. So in summary, we really don't think this is a decision for this committee. And to work that out, we'd like a delay. But we would also like a delay so that we can present the things that we were not asked to present with regard to its contribution, or we asked it for you to deny it. If this building is contributing, it cannot be demolished, nor can a visible addition be built. It's typical in this district to have significant changes, such as Jim Peters, who was here for most of this, said. Next slide. And finally, I do want to talk to you about the people of Old Town. They have a period before you. This is a part of Chicago real estate, west of Lincoln Park, that is the despair of bulldozers. No one had to lie down in the street. It's friends, we didn't pick it, we fixed it. So when the Plan Commission, an earlier group, thought of tearing it down, they preserved it. And this is a remark that might ring true today, but it was written in 1967. This organization is almost wholly responsible for the fact that there is an Old Town to fight over in 1967. And by their service and longevity alone, they deserve a respectful hearing. And in this case, I understand that many of the commissioners here are fairly new to this. And I really look forward to times when your communities preserve your neighborhood, can preserve the important things in other neighborhoods that we've been able to do in Old Town. Please grant us a delay or deny this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman. Does this committee have any further questions?
I'd be happy to answer questions from the commission.
Mr. Weiner, you had your hand up. I'm going to give you like a minute.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to remind the commission that we are retaining all four walls. The only thing we're removing is what is deemed not historic, which is the roof. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, if I might.
Go ahead, Deanna.
Thank you. I mean, the alderman brought a lot of information and very important information that deals with the National Register of this area. And as the alderman identified, they do have a listing of various, all the properties and ratings. As Larry explained, though, for the City of Chicago landmark designation, it is the area that is designated, and per the commission's ordinance and the rules and regulations, and specifically Article 3, Section G, it identifies legally how the commission needs to evaluate whether the property is contributing or not contributing when they're faced with a project like this. And that is, as Larry mentioned, case-by-case determination that you're making in a public meeting like this. This is a pre-permit evaluation, and you are giving advice to the property owner whether you would consider this building contributing or not contributing. The National Register rating for the property is advisory. The property owner does not require to deregister it or remove it from the National Register in order to proceed with the project. It is something that he would approach the state or the national keeper if there is an application for an incentive, for example, that someone is pursuing if they have a historic property. But regardless, though, the commission's authority stems from the landmarks ordinance and the rules and regulations in it, and how to identify and rate and decide on a property case by case. So if you wish to have any of that information, but I think you've heard a lot and you have a lot of information, pretty much everything that probably anybody knows about the property in order to make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. I am not seeing any further questions.
I would like to repeat my request to delay a vote, unless you're all willing to vote it down. I respect every one of you, and Old Town really needs your support. But I would like, in light of all of this, perhaps you'd like to have a conversation about whether or not to let this go, or to allow us some delay, or to refer it to the full commission. I will repeat, I don't like overruling the staff. I don't like having to ask for it. I think this process got off in kind of a rocky and perhaps not right stop.
Yeah, Alderman, so, you know, we have seen the number of meetings that you've attended, and as you have mentioned, you felt that you've attended as well as your constituents have attended these meetings under duress, etc. But you have been meeting for close to a year, or probably a little over a year. I believe that there has been sufficient time to review all items that this developer has gone back to, has shown that it's gone back to the table numerous times to try to appease all of the concerns that your constituents have brought forth.
Well, we have an independent board here, and I hope that they ask whatever questions they may have of me. I'm really happy to bring as much information forward as I possibly can.
Right. I appreciate that. There are no other questions on this, so therefore I would like to I'd like to request a motion to adopt the staff recommendations for this project. Is there anybody with?
I move that motion to adopt the staff recommendations.
That's Commissioner Osmond. Is there a second? I will second that. I will call for a vote on this. So the motion was moved by Commissioner Osmond, second by Commissioner Wong. Commissioner Hughes?
I'm sorry that you didn't see my hand, but yes.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. So you want to second? You can second it. That's fine.
It's okay. My vote is yes.
Okay. Commissioner Aguirre?
Yes.
Okay. The motion passes unanimously. I appreciate your patience on all of this. And I will hope that the developer can continue to work with this community and the aldermen to move forward in an amicable way. So I appreciate it, and we're going to keep moving because we do still have a long agenda here today. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is property located at 208 South Lasalle. This is the Continental and Commercial National Bank building. In the 42nd Ward, proposed installation of 3 separate canopies over the entrance doors located at LaSalle Street in replacement of the previously removed original terracotta feature at the 17th floor with new GFRC units. And Joyce, if you could go through this, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Continental and Commercial National Bank building is a significant early 20th century commercial building located in Chicago's historic LaSalle Street financial district. The gray terracotta-clad classical revival style building occupies a full city block bounded by LaSalle, Wells, Adams, and Quincy streets. A proposed new hotel will occupy floors 18 to 22, with its main entrance located on LaSalle Street, which is shown on the bottom, or on the photo on the bottom right. In order to provide its visitors shelter and protection from inclement weather, the applicant is proposing to install canopies for each of the 3 entrance doors. In order to improve the exterior facade, the applicant is proposing to replace the previously removed original terracotta cornice on the 17th floor with a new glass fiber reinforced concrete cornice. The owner is submitting a Class L application that will be reviewed by DPD, and will target a future commission meeting. Each of the proposed canopies will be contained between the columns and will not be attached to or cover any historic decorative elements. Each canopy will consist of a steel frame, steel valance, and a frosted glass roof supported by decorative iron brackets underneath and tied back with hanger rods above. All metal elements will have a painted matte black finish. The canopy projects out into the sidewalk approximately 9'4" from the face of the columns with an additional 2'7" canopy extension, for a total projection of approximately 12 feet. The width of the canopy will be 10 feet with a 3'10" separation between each canopy to expose the columns. The bottom of the canopy is 11'2" above grade, and the height of the valance, including the extension, is 2'8". The roof is slightly sloped backwards towards the building so water can be directed towards the drain pan. A drain pipe will also penetrate the flat area of stone adjacent to the canopy anchors. The details as proposed, of the proposed canopies are consistent with the existing canopy installed on the Adams Street elevation as seen in the photo on the upper left. Each canopy will be anchored to the existing structure in 4 locations: on the section of flat stone behind the columns as shown in the photo on the upper left, and on the flat area of stone between the columns as shown in the photo. Each canopy will be anchored on the existing structure in 4 locations: on the section of flat stone behind the columns as shown on the photo in the upper left, and on the flat area of stone between the ornamental door surround on the column as shown on the photo on the bottom left. If a visitor is under the canopy and looks up, they will still be able to see the ornamental door surround above, as shown in the rendering on the bottom right. No part of the canopy structure or steel frame will cover or be mechanically attached to any ornamental stone elements. Additionally, the proposed canopies are a reversible element and will not remove or damage any significant architectural features of the building. In the future, the canopies can be removed and the stone can be patched without damaging the integrity of the facade. The canopy has been designed to be compatible with the building, as it is proportional to each entrance door and will not damage any ornamental features of the building. Staff finds that the canopy will not have an adverse effect on the property. Staff recommends that electrical conduit and transformer boxes for any proposed signage, light fixtures, and heating lamps shall be concealed, and the location of any additional penetration shall be shown on the drawings. Staff also recommends that the applicant submit a cut sheet for the proposed light fixture for review and approval. And lastly, staff recommends that the product used to seal the joint between the canopies and the stone shall be clarified with a note on the drawings, and samples shall be reviewed and approved by historic preservation staff. No signage is approved at this time. Drawings of any signage to be attached to the canopies and entrances shall be submitted for review by historic preservation staff under a separate building permit application submission. The second part of this presentation is for the 17th floor cornice. The applicant is proposing to replace the original and previously removed projecting decorative terracotta band on the 17th floor, which was removed in the 1950s, likely due to deterioration. The cornice was replaced with standing seam metal panels, as you can see in the photo on the right, and the applicant proposes to remove these panels and install a new glass fiber reinforced concrete cornice. The design of the original terracotta cornice, as you can see in yellow on the historic picture on the left, included an integral gutter system which likely caused water infiltration issues. The original cornice was 6 feet tall and projected 2'10" from the face of the building. It featured a vertical plane containing a Greek key relief with courses of concave units below, creating a dramatic profile. The applicant has submitted 2 cornice replacement options for review. Both options are shown on this slide, with option 1 in the center and option 2 on the right. Please note that the profile of the original cornice is shown in yellow and the proposed cornice is shown in blue. In option 1, the proposed cornice is a modified version of the original cornice that utilizes only the top portion of the original profile in order to reduce the overall height, so it fits underneath the existing windowsill, as well as maintaining the vertical area for the Greek key design relief. The original projection will also be reduced for structural and maintenance reasons. In this option, the proposed cornice will be 4'4" tall and project 1 foot from the face of the building. The height of the Greek key relief will be 2 foot 1 inches. In option 2, the profile of the original cornice has been maintained, but the size of this proposed cornice has been scaled down approximately 25% of its original size in order for it to fit underneath the existing windowsill. In this option, the proposed cornice will be 4 foot 6 inches tall and project 2 foot 1 inches from the face of the building. The height of the Greek key relief will be 1 foot 7 inches. The original profile has been largely maintained with slight modifications in order to fit in the existing location. Staff recommends approval of option 2 as it is a better representation of the original design, which are based on original drawings and historic photographs. While the scale of the original cornice is reduced, the profile and projection of this option restore the missing architectural feature more closely in design and visual impact. In contrast, the profile of option 1 projects 1 foot from the face of the building compared to the original 2 foot 10 inch projection. This profile is essentially flat as the elements that are being replicated are derived from the small projecting unit on the front of the cornice to the top, disregarding the projecting stepped and curved units below that give the cornice its prominence. While this option does provide more area to feature the Greek key relief, this level of detail will not be detectable from the street level. Staff recommends that the applicant shall provide dimension detailed drawings of the GFRC units with notes to show that all work will match historic shapes and profiles of the original units and match the range of color, finish, texture, and other visual qualities of the surrounding terracotta units. The sketch shown here on the upper right is the proposed Greek key design to be featured on the face of the cornice. A clear or enlarged image was not submitted to historic preservation staff for review. Since the design of the relief cannot be substantiated by documentary, physical, or pictorial evidence, staff recommends that the design of the proposed relief should be an existing pattern that is already found on the building. Examples are shown on the photos on the bottom of this slide. Additionally, dimension detailed drawings of the Greek key relief shall be provided for review. Currently, the submitted drawings show the new cornice on the LaSalle Street facade and wrapping around one bay on the Quincy and Adams Street elevations. Per the applicant, the overall scope of work for the Class L project is under further evaluation, and a revised submission will be provided for review. The revised Class L application will address the extent of the proposed new cornice installation beyond what is currently shown on the drawings. The applicant requests at this time that the committee only consider the design of the cornice and that the decision regarding whether the cornice shall be installed on all elevations of the building shall be considered at the time the commission reviews the Class L application. Okay. Listed here are the staff recommendations, which were also addressed during the presentation. The proposed canopy design has been reviewed with Alderman Riley, and he has no objections. Mike Rushke of the Prime Group, Russell Bond of Klein and Hoffman, and Carlos Valdez of Lucien Legrand Studio are here to answer any questions the committee may have and would also like to make a presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Does the committee have any questions of Joyce? Seeing none. You said that the applicant is here.
Yes.
Would they like to make a presentation or statement?
This is Mike Reschke. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mike.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Mike, still with us?
Presentation here. I'm sorry for the delay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me,
Yes.
but not see me.
Hard for me to say. I'm on my phone.
There we go. All right.
So-
Well, thank you. Sorry for the confusion, but thank you for your time this afternoon. I know it's been a long day, and so I'll try to keep my comments brief. I'm the CEO of the Prime Group. We've a real estate investment and development company based here in Chicago since 1982. We've developed many properties in the Chicagoland area and downtown Chicago, as well as throughout the United States. We also have had what we believe a very significant input in the renovation of some of our more significant historic buildings in the city, starting with 208 South Lasalle. We acquired the building in 2005, and we redeveloped the lower 12 floors into the award-winning JW Marriott, which opened in 2010 to much acclaim and much success, and really was the impetus for the revitalization of the LaSalle Street and adding life and vibrancy to the downtown area after 5 o'clock during the week and on weekends. We also recently, 5 years ago, completed the historic renovation of 11 South LaSalle, the historic Roanoke building, into the world's largest residence inn. It's on the corner of Madison and LaSalle. Again, another award-winning project, very successful historic renovation. And we've worked many years with the Landmarks Commission and staff very successfully, and we appreciate the relationship we've had over the last 20 years doing historic buildings here. We're now bringing to the city on the upper floors of the historic Daniel Burnham building a new 5-star luxury hotel. It'll be the first true 5-star hotel for downtown Chicago. We started construction earlier this year. We intend to open the hotel in September of next year. And our application today is simply to add canopies that we believe we were very thoughtful in the design and planning to not affect any of the important architectural elements of the building, and building 3 separate canopies to not interrupt the visual integrity of the colonnade in the front of the building on the LaSalle Street facade. These canopies are very similar in design to the canopies that we built on Adams Street on the same building but around the corner for the JW Marriott, and pretty similar in design to the beautiful canopy that we built for the Residence Inn at 11 South LaSalle, 2 blocks to the north. Thank you, Joyce, for an excellent presentation. The only question that we've raised with the staff in the last week or so, we've been advised by some of our engineers and architects that the option 2 version, which the staff prefers, is a deeper, wider spandrel that has, we can turn to that for a second. Thank you. If you could go to option 1 and option 2. This is the original design.
Okay. I believe this is option 1 right here.
Okay, thank you. So option 1, our original concept was to add this as an interpretive element in lieu of the sheet metal that's up there right now, and it protrudes 1 foot from the building. The staff would like more articulation, and so at the request, we presented them option 2. If we could turn to that for a second. And I just, want to point out to the commission's standpoint that this is not a cost issue. It's a subjective architectural issue, but also we've been advised that there's potential life safety issue with this deeper facade at the top, with the spandrel at the top, which is now 2'1" with a gentle slope down, that we're going to have a falling ice issue when we have freeze and thaw conditions in the city. And this is on the 17th floor. And we respectfully would ask the staff to reconsider option 1 versus option 2, or we're happy to work with the staff and create a hybrid option that maybe is deeper, protrudes more, that they're seeking to get that look, which is fine, but I think we need to put more of an angle on the top of the spandrel to reduce the amount of potential freeze and thaw ice falling off the 17th floor. So I'll limit my comments to that. I'd like to turn it over to Rochelle, who's with Klein and Hoffman, has done a lot of architectural historic research on this building and has worked on this building for many, many years with us, and and ask him to comment on the spandrel issue, if you don't mind, Rochelle. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, as Mike had said, Klein and Hoffman has been involved in this building for several years, and obviously most recently with the current work that is being proposed. As far as this 17th band cornice, as you're calling it, the reason why we prefer option 1 over option 2, as Mike said, is a couple of reasons. One is definitely there is less projection for option 1, which would mean less possibility of accumulation of ice and snow as compared to option 2. The other reason why we would recommend option 1 is if we try to modify option 2 as far as getting a better slope, it would then make the relief panel even smaller than it is right now, which is only about 1'7", I believe. So by increasing that slope, we would then need to eat into that the panel dimension. So we felt that relief panel, even though it is 17 floors up, it would still be visible. So we were trying to get as much of that relief shown on the building, which is achieved with option number 1. We have worked with Barry Meyer to get some pricing and to find out how feasible this either option is for panelized GFRC, and it is feasible. So there isn't any issues there. We've also worked with several contractors to find out, just some of the logistics of building either option. But again, we would prefer option 1 over option 2 at this time. As far as life safety, obviously, the more projection you have, there's the possibility of, especially when, for example, window washing operations, that those individuals may end up damaging it if it's projecting out more. So obviously, the smaller projection would be a better option. And I can answer any questions that you might have about either option.
Okay, thank you. Does the committee have any questions of the applicant at this time? I am seeing none.
This case is for both the cornice and the canopies, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That is correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I know that I think this is a general comment, not directed at this particular owners group, but I know we've approved canopies with this exact profile in the past. I just, moving forward, I think anyone that comes forward with a canopy proposal, it's okay to deviate away from that, is my comment. I see this canopy everywhere downtown. I'm assuming it's because we're approving them. And I think it's okay to have some variation on our historic buildings. So that's my comment about that. I think it's a detail comment. As far as the cornice goes, I like option 2 because it mimics the original profile more closely. However, I did hear and understand your statement about safety and the lesser relieved option 1 accumulating less ice. That really resonated with me. So I'm going to open it up to my counterparts to comment as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Any other questions?
I just have a comment, quick comment about the cornice. It's something that it's at a height that I feel as if with less profile will be less relevant visually. So I guess my recommendation would be to explore a hybrid. I feel it does seem really flat, the option 1, and I understand, but I would look at something that keeps a little bit of the visual prominence of that element, especially for being in that height. and similar feelings about the canopies. I feel like there's other materials. I'm sure you get a recommendation very specific on materials. And there's some contemporary moves that could be also very beautiful and very relevant and out and bringing much more elegance to historic buildings such as the one that you own. So just generally speaking, I think it's a good solution. It's the right thing to do. It looks good. But inevitably we'll start seeing more of the same and monotonous kind of expression in our new renovations. And if anything, all buildings were about uniqueness and authenticity and, you know, attention to details that were very conspicuous. So you know, just reflecting on the same things then Commissioner Hughes, but yeah, I concur with the staff's recommendations.
Oh,
Thank
can
you.
I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to, in response of the hybrid version, I guess I would ask the committee to maybe give the authority to the staff to, you know, work with us and come up with a hybrid that has more depth, but also has more of an angle at the top and will create less risk of ice falling in a freeze and thaw period. With regard to the canopy, I would like to point out it is a very unique canopy compared to what we built for the JW Marriott and built for the 11 South LaSalle, which were solid canopies. Of course, black wrought iron with frosted white glass, which is a very traditional look, which is a material that's often used in canopies with historic buildings. But this canopy is 3 separate elements. There's actually about 3 feet of space between the 3 canopies. That's not really functional for a luxury hotel because obviously if it's raining, you don't have total protection. But you know, we did it to be you know, respectful of the facade of the building and to have it be lighter and different. Now the materials are the same, but it's no different than a limestone column is the same limestone column. So yes, materials are the same, but I would submit that the canopy on LaSalle Street is significantly different from the canopy around the corner on Adams because it's 3 separate elements. I just wanted to point that out. And Lucien Lagrange and his partner is he designed the canopies as well, all of them. And I don't know if Lucien, you might have a comment that you'd like to make at this time.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Carlos Valdez with Lucien Lagrange Studio. Yeah, I concur with Mike that this canopy is unique, although it is very complementary canopy at the Marriott just around the block from this site. And we, you know, just a general statement, we do want to adopt all the recommendations from the staff and proceed as noted.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah. What I'd like to do is I'd like to request a motion giving the staff direction in terms of working with the owner to develop a hybrid of the cornice. And what I'd like to do also is Commissioner Hughes, if you could, would be the designated commissioner then to kind of oversee that, if you will.
The canopy?
No, the cornice.
Oh, I think Commissioner Aguirre was the one that suggested the hybrid. I would like to put her forward.
Okay. Commissioner Aguirre.
Happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wong, could I I'm sorry to interrupt, could I just make one statement?
Sure.
So as previously mentioned, this is likely a Class L application that you will be seeing, and certainly staff could work with the applicant to revise or bring back at the time of the Class L application review by the commission a revised profile.
Okay.
So what you're saying is that there's no need for that right now because there will be other opportunities to go over design features. Am I hearing that correctly?
So you obviously can decide to agree with the staff recommendation, agree with the applicant's request for option 1, or if you are modifying the decision to say, let's find a different solution, a different hybrid solution, you will have an opportunity to see that solution at the time of the Class L review and make a final decision on it at that point as well.
And just to reiterate, the recommendation of the staff is option 2.
That's correct.
Okay.
In that case, Commissioner Wong, I motion us to approve this proposal on the condition that we will see a future revision to the cornice during the Class L review.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Is there a second?
Second.
Please, Commissioner Geary seconds that.
Second.
Right. On the so it's moved by Commissioner Hughes, second by Commissioner Geary. Commissioner Osman, your vote? And I vote yes as well. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, folks. Good luck, and we'll see where you go with that. The next item on the agenda is a property located at 75 East Wacker. This is a Mather Tower. This is a proposed attached canopy over canopies today. Attached canopy over a main entrance to a hotel. Emily, if you could take us through that.
Yes, definitely. So another canopy proposal. It looks different, so there's something. The Club Quarters Hotel is the primary tenant in Mather Tower, and they are interested in replacing the current non-historic canopy with a new canopy, more permanent and complementing the building. So as I said, this is the non-historic canopy in place. It's partially freestanding, but it's still attached to the entry vestibule. So this will be removed and replaced with a new one. Next, please. Thank you. It'll cantilever over the main entrance to the hotel. Staff and the applicant were unable to find any historic imagery of what a canopy on this building would have looked like in the past. So instead, the canopy was designed to be more simple and contemporary, so as to not compete with any of the ornamentation. The new canopy is proposed to be constructed primarily out of dark charcoal finished aluminum panels with a depth of approximately 1 foot and 10 feet wide on both sides. So the canopy will be attached to the building by tying into an existing structural steel tube that is just below the ribbed brass plate ceiling of the outer vestibule. The canopy will also be attached by cables to the existing stanchions on the building. The existing drain pipe along the northern edge is proposed to be retained and reused for drainage. The canopy is designed, as you can see, to sit just below the decorative bronze frieze so that it will not cover or even touch any ornamental features. The goal is to create a sort of floating element as it is not attached to the storefront. Okay. Below the aluminum panels, the applicant is proposing to add a border of glass rectangles approximately 4 inches tall. This would increase the overall depth to closer to 1.5 feet. Because the canopy features integral lighting and heating on the underside, the clear glass elements will prominently glow. So that is not a distraction, staff recommends that the glass components either be eliminated or just revised to be frosted so that you can't see the actual fixtures or anything underneath. So staff recommends approval of this project with the conditions stated. And I believe both the owner's representative and architect are here if you have any questions or questions for me.
Thank you, Emily. Does the committee have any questions for Emily at this time?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The cable detail that's holding up this structure. Can the architect explain that a little bit more? You know, when I think of cable, it's usually in tension, but with our wind downtown, I'm a little bit, I just would like a little explanation on how that's going to work.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Rebecca Delatoy. I'm representing the architect as he is not able to be here today. We would propose that a structural engineer actually come through and design and make sure that it is safe enough. And when we say cable, it might be, more of a rod than anything, but it would be definitely looked at an engineer to make sure that, the existing steel beam in just below the ceiling there, as well as the stanchion is sufficient to hold up this. Because yes, I know, especially in that area, it's a big concern, the high winds in the area. Yes.
The wind. Thank you so much. I was
of course.
It's innovative. It's exactly what I'm saying, with the last one, and it sounds good.
Okay, I appreciate your comments.
Would the applicant like to make any further comments about this project?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hi, I'm Gary Lewandowski. I'm owner's rep for the Michigan Wacker Associates LLC, who own the building. We've owned the building since, I don't know if anyone knows the history, but we've owned the building now for over 20 years. And we lovingly restored it to its grandeur in terms of a lot of repair to the exterior terracotta, which I don't know if all of you know, but was a major hazard back in the day when it was falling off the building. So I think we're trying to respect. Obviously, it's one of our prized buildings that we own, and obviously we're trying to respect it with the design being more contemporary. And I think sounds like it generally got some support from the staff, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Emily, for your words and presentation. And I think the only thing that I had a question on was on the glass. I guess I appreciate where you're coming from in terms of wanting it not clear, maybe frosted, but frosted meaning that it could be maybe textured glass or I mean, is that kind of, I mean, what's the interpretation of, I guess, it not being clear rather than, strictly something that may be like a sandblasted look or whatever?
Sure.
Emily, could you go ahead?
I mean, I think that we would be comfortable with, exploring multiple things. If that's what you're interested in, we can take a look at, texture that would kind of warp. We just don't want to see straight through is basically the issue. So if it is some kind of texture or potentially even some kind of fritting on the glass, that's definitely something we can, if the commission is amenable, that's definitely something that I think we could work with you on.
And I think there's possibility, obviously not necessarily copying any of the motif, but the fact that it is a Gothic kind of structure, that there's the ability of fretting or whatever that would kind of give that kind of general verticality feel to it. So I think we're open to explore those if you can work with us.
Sounds like everybody's on the same page. Does the committee have any further questions of the applicant or Emily? Does not seem to have any. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the staff recommendation. And
I will approve the staff recommendation.
Okay, I'm sorry, who was that?
It was Lynn Osmond, Commissioner Osmond.
Oh, Commissioner Osmond, thank you. And a second?
Second.
I'm
Gary.
sorry. Thank you. I hate this on my phone. This is crazy. Commissioner Hughes, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Good luck, Mr. Lewandowski.
Thank you.
And Becky. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Next item on the
Bye-bye.
agenda is the property located at 3157 North Elston. This is the proposed Morton Salt Company warehouse complex, proposed interior and exterior rehabilitation of the existing industrial complex. And Matt, if you could go through this. One of the things I'm going to ask you, Matt, when you do go through this, could you further or just keep in mind that there was a request by Ward Miller regarding the signage, if you could explain that or emphasize that as well.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. This is the Morton Salt Company warehouse complex. It was built in 1930 and designed by the prominent architectural firm of Grant Anderson, Probst & White. Morton Salt occupied this site from 1930 to 2015, so about 85 years. And here it processed salt mined in Michigan for distribution to Chicago consumers. The current owners of the site, Blue Star Properties, is planning the adaptive reuse and renovation of the complex with multiple tenants and uses. The owner is seeking preliminary approval on their redevelopment project to ensure that the work meets your standards so that they can move forward with landmark designation in the near future. The complex is located on the bank of the North Branch of the Chicago River in the West Town community area. So it's a large complex, and the best way to look at it is dividing it into three chunks. The first is the shed building outlined in green. That is to be a proposed music and event venue. There is a freestanding garage, kind of a utilitarian structure outlined in yellow. That would be a food and beverage kind of uses. And then there is the blue outline building, which is known as the package buildings. And the proposed use there would be office and complementary commercial usage. So I'll take a look at each three parts of the complex separately. So starting with the shed building first, the applicant proposes removing this lean-to rail car shelter, which was built in 1994. And they also plan to replace the roof surface. It looks like corrugated metal. It's actually a product called Transite. Transite is a manufactured panel of lightweight concrete reinforced with asbestos. So that's original for the building. So for the roof, the applicant proposes to replace the Transite with an insulated roof panel shown at right. The outer face of the proposed panel has ribs to resemble the corrugation of the original roof. The spacing of the corrugation of the original is 5 inches on center. The proposed replacement has corrugation at around 10 inches on center, the narrowest available. As an insulated panel, the overall height of the panel proposed is approximately 5 inches, while that of the existing is 1.75 inches. This difference will be slightly noticeable at the eave. Staff recommends approval of the roof replacement. The Transite panel is at the end of its lifespan, deteriorated and no longer manufactured due to the asbestos content. The proposed panel is lightweight, so the steel structure, a character-defining feature of the interior of the shed, will not need reinforcement. The insulation is also necessary for the building's new use, which will be occupied. While the spacing of the corrugation is different, it will be visually insignificant at a roof of this massive scale. The painted sign on the roof of the shed building is a familiar icon in Chicago, especially for travelers on the Kennedy and Elston. The photo at left shows the original painted sign that existed since 1930. Though it was repainted again and again, the design remained unchanged until the 1970s or 80s, when it was revised to include the Morton Salt Girl, which is what we see today. The applicant proposes to replicate the current sign in paint on the new roof surface. As the existing sign is painted onto the failed roof surface, staff recommends approving the plan to replicate in paint the existing sign on the new roof. The west elevation of the shed, original loading doors have been infilled. The applicant proposes to reopen the existing entrances and window openings into the proposed entertainment venue. Before moving on to the east elevation of the shed, it's important to note that there was a second shed building on the site known as the east shed, shown here in red. It was demolished earlier this year with city permits. That structure was substantially deteriorated due to its long-term exposure to salt, which is a corrosive agent to steel. So this is actually a drone photo of what we see today, looking into that area where the shed was. In the removal of that structure, which was attached to the existing shed, there is exposed concrete wall and steel structural columns along the east elevation. The applicant intends to preserve these materials and structure in a patinated state. The applicant is also proposing an addition at the east elevation of the shed, indicated with the arrow in this aerial. This elevation lies within an interior court formed by the other buildings of the complex and is largely not visible from the public way. The addition is indicated in red in this section. It is a one-story addition extending the length of the east elevation. The floor level of the addition aligns with the eave of the existing roof. The elevated floor structure will be carried on steel columns rising from grade. It will be topped with a shed roof extending from the existing roof. The interior will enclose a hall to access raised box seating in the entertainment venue. The exterior, as shown in the rendering at right, will be a series of open balconies with views to the Chicago River and the city. Staff recommends approval of this addition at this elevation, which is secondary due to its very limited visibility from the public way. So this is the interior of the shed. The applicant proposes to convert this space into an entertainment venue while preserving the exposed steel structure, overall volume, and industrial character of this massive interior. These are the first and second floor plans of the shed and what they're proposing. At the south end or right side of these plan drawings would be built out with a performance stage and 2 stories of backstage rooms. The north end of the shed or left side of these plans would be occupied by a 3-story structure with sloped theater seating. The middle of the shed would remain open. And here are the sections looking north and south. You'll see that the overall height, steel structure, and industrial character of the space is to be preserved. Transitioning to the packaging buildings at the north end of the site, these are 1- and 2-story brick buildings. The applicant proposes replacing windows and doors, reopening bricked up windows and doors, of which there are many, enlarging select window openings for light and vent requirements, and a new canopy is proposed for the loading dock at the east elevation. And finally, there is the garage building, a utilitarian structure at the northeast corner of the site, and changes to this building are similar to what is proposed for the packaging buildings, replacing windows and the garage door and reopening bricked up openings. Wanted to show a few renderings on the next slide. I'm sorry, that's the garage building. Again, the work here is similar to the package building. And the next slide has a few renderings. So at upper left, we're looking aerial view down onto the garage. And behind that would be the east elevation of the packaging buildings. Below that is the west elevation of the packaging buildings, which faces Elston Avenue, a very visible portion of this building. There is a current loading dock and a rail spur there. That the loading dock will be preserved. You'll see openings on that loading dock. Those openings are there. They've just been bricked up over time. And then on the upper right is the, which you've seen, the proposed east elevation addition. So staff recommends that the committee find that the project will not have an adverse effect on the proposed landmark property with the following conditions. First one is that the drawings that we've shown you today will be developed with a complete set showing existing conditions, proposed demolition, proposed additions and alterations, so a complete set. We want to see masonry and concrete repair details, structural steel repair details. We want to make the condition that new or enlarged window openings should match the proportion, scale, horizontal alignment, and punch character of the historic openings. Window and door details should be submitted to staff with the permit application for approval. The painted sign on the west slope of the roof will be replicated in its entirety, and no additional signage or lighting is approved with this sign. So I know owners from Blue Star are here. If you have any questions for them, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Larry. Does the committee have any questions for Larry at this time?
More of a comment and a question. This is a very exciting building, very iconic. I feel like we all have passed the highway and waved at the girl with the umbrella in some capacity. So yeah, I'm just curious about, can you describe more the texture, the type of panel that is going to replace this shed, which is very significant. I'm assuming there's some acoustics related to it, but like, what is it, a reflective material? Is it, I just want to know more, how's it going to absorb the artwork that seems very iconic and that specifically in that view?
Thanks, Commissioner. We'll get to that slide. So, and the owner can speak to this too. They have looked at a number of roofing panel systems. So what's proposed is basically a sandwich where you've got sheet metal exterior and I believe an interior layer sandwich between insulated foam. And these panels would, they're 40 inches, there's 3 feet 6 inches wide. The thicknesses vary depending on the R value that the project needs. And so what's been proposed to us is a approximately 5-inch thick panel. I think, and then, like I said, the corrugation is different from the existing transite product. But I think if this was a smaller building with a smaller roof, I think that difference would be noticeable. But I think in a building of a roof of this size, I think visually that difference is going to be diminished just because the scale is so huge. The panel height of 5 inches, again, I'm not sure, for a smaller building it would be an issue, but something that's this large, I think you're only going to notice that at the eave line, and that has to be somehow finished according to the standards for this kind of panel. The other advantage of this is it's lightweight, so that they can install this on the existing steel structure, which they do need to do repairs to, but without having to substantially reinforce that structure. And that is something that I know the applicant wants to maintain the industrial feel of that interior. So it does bring those advantages.
Thank you.
Commissioner Aguirre. Yep. All right. And then the last question I had, there was a comment that Ward Miller had made earlier regarding the signage, and I wanted to cover that in terms of is there a way to protect or landmark the image? And I guess, you know, that's a hard thing because there are times we landmark signs and the sign itself is, the structure itself is landmark. But then in this particular case, you're replicating the image. Or does that get into trademark infringement? I'm not sure how that would work. Or perhaps Blue Star can address that. So maybe we can.
I do know that the applicant's Blue Star, one of their tenants in the new office building or in the packaging buildings will be Morton Salt's Research and Development Group, which is, I thought, pretty interesting. I'm assuming that they've discussed this with Morton.
Okay.
I think that just points out that Morton still will have a presence here.
Right.
We also know that the sign has been repainted again and again, and for much of its life, it was the one on the left, and then they kind of went with a new font. And
right. Okay. All right. Commissioner Hughes, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I echo Commissioner Uri's comments that this is such a significant site, and I'm very excited to see it be brought back to life in this way. And I think it's really playing off of the context and what's happening in this area with other developments that I think it's only going to really bring life back to this industrial corridor. So thank you guys for putting all of that effort in. I did want to ask about the roof profile as well. Was it not possible to get the same corrugation that was there previously? I think that this, you know, the tight ripples is kind of a character and effect that was to the existing roof structure that I notice very well from, I understand what Larry is saying with the scale, it doesn't really matter as much, but I would respectfully disagree that, you know, those ripples are very much in tune with the character of the structure.
We did ask the applicant if they explored a custom option, and maybe that can be put to them again. I was surprised, you know, they did ask the manufacturer, they explored many products, and this one had the tightest spacing that they could find. They asked the manufacturer about custom, and apparently this is a small order for this manufacturer. They do a lot of like Amazon facilities, huge jobs. But I think I agree, you know, what you see now is almost like a corduroy. And this is different. But I just felt that of a roof of this size, it would be less significant. The spacing is 5 inches on center for existing, and the proposed is 10.
Well, if we've actually explored what the original could look like in a manufacturer that could actually do it, and that's not possible with the order size, I guess this is acceptable.
This is Tyler Quast from Blue Star Properties. We did go through extensive research to find the product that we currently have right now, and this is the closest we can get in the scope and size of what it is that we're doing. And we thought that was an important item as well.
One of the things we also asked about is, can you add onto this system, you know, additional corrugation, like adding like a hat channel on top of it, and that would of course void the warranty for the product.
Well, we don't want that.
So the folks at Blue Star, do you have any further comments on this?
And I'll speak real quick. Tyler Quast, Blue Star Properties. We appreciate the consideration to be landmarked in this situation when we're looking to do something really fun with an adaptive reuse of this, this old industrial building. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Does the committee have any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Hughes, your hand is still up.
It is still up. I don't know. Yeah, no further questions.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is really exciting. With that in mind, I'd like to.
I motion.
All right, Commissioner Hughes, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Aguirre, Commissioner Osmond, how do you vote?
I approve.
And I approve as well. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Tyler. Good luck and hoping to see some really good stuff coming up.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
All right. We're getting there, folks. Next property is located at 2023 West North Avenue. I am recusing myself from this. Paula, will you be able to? Excuse me?
Yes, I will guide us through item 5.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go on my bathroom break.
It's not as dramatic when you just turn off your camera, but yes. So item 5 of the agenda, it's property located on 2023 West North. It's the Milwaukee Avenue District, which is a proposed 2-story brick substation on an existing surface parking lot. And I would like to call Joyce for the presentation, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Aguirre. A new substation is needed to meet existing and future service demands for the Chicago Transit Authority to address the traction power needs on the O'Hare branch of the Blue Line. The proposed building will be located at 2023 West North Avenue, just west of Milwaukee Avenue in the Milwaukee Avenue District. The site, as you can see in the photo on the right, is currently used as a parking lot. Here are some context photos showing the buildings adjacent to the site, with the site location indicated with the red arrow. The Milwaukee Avenue District retains a solid and exceptional group of historic neighborhood commercial buildings with a broad range of architectural styles from the late 19th to the early 20th centuries. As the district developed, larger and more diverse building types appeared, including banks, office buildings, and entertainment venues. The resulting rich mix of building types and styles gives the district a visually distinct and urban character within the neighborhood context of Chicago's Northwest Side. The proposed Damon substation will be a 2-story masonry building located immediately west of the CTA Blue Line elevated tracks. The front of the building is comprised of a 1-story annex building with a larger 2-story substation building directly behind it. The proposed building will be set back 38 feet from the street, and this setback will provide a paved public plaza. The proposed substation is 32 feet to the top of the parapet, which is in keeping with the adjacent buildings on the same side of the street. The building will have a structural system infilled with brick, metal louvers, metal panels, and curtain wall systems. Ornamental fencing will include the employee parking area and ComEd vaults at grade and will also be used as screening on the roof of the annex building. Here are material samples of the galvanized metal used for the structural steel and standard size manganese iron spot smooth brick. Metal louvers and metal panels will be pre-finished in a stone gray color, and the curtain wall system will have clear vision glass. The plaza will be constructed of permeable pavers accented with concrete bands, with the material samples shown here at the bottom of the slide. There is a potential for murals to be installed on the brick facades and the pavers on the plaza in order to add visual interest to the exterior, as shown in the rendering on the right. Staff suggests that any paint used shall be vapor permeable as to avoid trapping water in the masonry, and any physical attachment for mural panels should be located at mortar joints to avoid damaging the masonry. As you can see in the rendering on the right, the proposed substation is set back significantly and located behind the CTA Blue Line elevated tracks, and visibility of the building from North Avenue will be obscured. In conclusion, the Commission encourages good contemporary design that respects the district's existing architectural and historic qualities, but does not necessarily replicate historic designs. Therefore, the proposed infill construction of the Damon substation will not have an adverse effect on the significant historical and architectural features of the district. Staff recommends approval of the project as submitted. Alderman Laspada has reviewed the project and has submitted a letter of support, which was also included in your packet. Architect Carol Ross Barney and Pedro Hurtado of the CTA are here to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Do any of the commissioners present have any questions for the staff? I do have a question, Joyce, or the architects or CTA staff. Can you clarify what is the program for the substation?
I know Pedro's here too, but I'll explain it in absolute layman's terms that you're sure to understand. How's that? Basically, the function of the substation is to convert AC power from Edison to DC power, which is what operates the CTA system. So on the drawing that's up there, what you see is two Commonwealth Edison transformers that are located right here. Those will be located in vaults below grade. So AC power enters the building, and basically it's a series of transformers and rectifiers that convert the power to DC power, which exits the building here at this upper corner at about track elevation. There is a cable tray that, if you look up over the city, you'll see these all over where the substations are. But basically, the cables exit the building at almost track level, and then they're joined directly to the track. So that's what's in the building. The building actually has no habitable human space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that explains a lot.
Commissioner Hughes, do you have a additional comment, question?
I just want to say that I appreciate, I didn't know much about substations, so thank you so much for explaining that, Carol Ross Barney. And upon, when we got our homework to review these cases, upon looking up other substations, I appreciate that you guys brought architecture to this particular location for the substation, because it is, they don't look like this around the rest of the city.
Thank you. Thank you. The CTA, our idea for the site was to be really respectful of the urban character and do a building that basically honors infrastructure. So it's very straightforward. The materials are very straightforward, and we hope that it's just well composed.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So the glass, CTA is excited about being able, at this substation, this is the first one we've done like this. People who are traveling on the train or standing on the platform will be able to see into the building and see the equipment that converts the electricity. It doesn't move or anything like that, but there are lighted panels and stuff like that. So even at night, it'll glow really softly. And so it's a peek into how the CTA works.
Yeah, there is one of these buildings, anything that is infrastructure and without any human uses, by University of Chicago, I think, in Hyde Park area, and it's really beautiful at night. That you can see the machinery, and is this box that is just like a lantern. So I imagine this is just a smaller version, a neighborhood version of that. Is there any, can I just ask out of curiosity about the manganese iron brick material? Is there anything special or required for this type, or is it just the aesthetic?
No, the brick is a standard size, and it's called an iron spot because it's a real hard, a really hard burn, and the clay contains a lot of iron, so you get little spots on the surface. The reason we selected it is because it is a hard surface brick, which makes it more resistant to graffiti. The color we've selected is a gray. It has some hints of red in it. And the reason we selected it is the structural frame will be made out of galvanized metal. The idea that we have for this is that it'll be minimal maintenance for CTA. That's one of their major criterias because money for maintenance isn't always there. And so galvanized is a material that patinas to a gray finish. And unless it's graffitied or destroyed some way, does not need paint or maintenance.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Commissioners, any additional questions for the applicant or the architect? I just have one more last question about the fencing. Is that something in the purview of the scope of work here?
Yeah, if we can go back to the site plan, I can show you where the fencing is. Okay, basically, the only place, what you're seeing, yeah, the fence is here, and what we're fencing at that point is it's a little work area for CTA. It also meets we have to provide one handicap parking space, not for parking ordinance, but for the handicap ordinance. And so that's inside that little area too. But this is basically a storage and workspace for CTA. The other place where we have fencing is around the 2 transformer vaults. Even though they're below grade, Edison wants them to be fenced off. And so that's where you see the fencing. Right now, the color that you see is correct. And most likely it will be a paint finish. We're working on that still.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, the design of the fence is, it's basically vanes. And so you won't see through it from every angle, but again, you'll see through it every now and then. And it's meant to reflect the industrial character of the building.
And the total height, can you just comment on that real quick? And we see it in comparison with the tracks, but
yeah, I think that was part of Joyce's report, and I'm going to be really stupid by not knowing how tall my own building is. The only numbers I remember are my children's birthdays.
It was proposed to be 32 feet.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say 32.
Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, the floor to floor is based on the equipment requirements. It's not a human dimension, so there are 2 floors in there.
Well, thank you. Commissioners, any final comments, questions, concerns?
I motion to accept the staff changes and recommendations, not changes, the staff recommendations.
Recommendations. Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Can I have a second? Then I will second. Do we still have Commissioner?
I'll second then if you want.
Thank you, Commissioner Osman. So I have a motion moved by Commissioner Hughes. I have a second by Commissioner Osman, and I vote yes. I think with that, the motion carries. The motion carries, and we can bring back our chair to continue with the next agenda item. I hope I didn't embarrass you too much, Chair.
You did fantastic. I'm stepping down.
I'll pass the baton back to you. I really appreciate all the work that you
job.
did during this meeting.
And Carol, good luck with that. It sounds wonderful. This is the next following project. We're almost there, folks. We have 2 more. Project located at 1035 South Claremont. This is the Claremont Cottages District with the proposed rear addition with extended dormers. And Emily, if you could take us through this, would be great.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So As mentioned, the subject property is located mid-block on Claremont Avenue in the heart of the Claremont Cottages district and is currently vacant. The applicants are also applying for the property tax assessment freeze program, and the proposal has been both reviewed and approved by the State Historic Preservation Office. So currently, there is a non-historic frame one-story addition at the rear of the building. As a part of the rehab work, the applicant is proposing to remove this and replace it with a new two-story addition, shown here in purple. The proposed addition will be 20 feet long with a rear wood deck extending an additional 8 feet. And that will be inset from the north side of the existing building, approximately 2 feet, as you can see on that site plan. So the new work is proposed to be frame construction, clad in a smooth fiber cement siding, and is no taller or wider than the historic cottage. The slope and ridge line of the addition roof will also match the existing house roof. In order to make the second floor space habitable, the applicant is proposing to extend an existing dormer on the north elevation west approximately 13 feet to the end of the cottage, and meeting up with the new addition in the rear. On the new portion of the south elevation, the applicant proposes to include another dormer, 10 foot 6 inches in length, set back approximately 45 feet from the front of the cottage. So the Claremont Cottages district is characterized in part by narrow side yards, and the applicant has included photos indicating the visibility of the new proposed work. On the north elevation, the side yard is only 2 foot 3 inches, and the new work will be very minimally visible, with most of the new dormer blocked by the existing dormer. Additionally, the addition is inset 2 feet, which will further really minimize sightlines and visibility. It's boxed out in red, you can see. The south elevation, on the other hand, has a much wider side yard of 12 foot 6 inches. However, the historic cottage has 2 bays to the south that block much of the visibility of the proposed rear addition. The new dormer, however, will be partially visible. It'll be constructed on the new work located behind the tree in that photo you can see. Dormers are very characteristic of this district, due in part to the steep roof lines of the cottages. I started making this map, and then I realized every single house in the district has dormers, so everyone does. Generally speaking, the shed dormers that are found are later additions. However, many of the houses have these small triangular hooded dormers, as you can see on that bottom photo, that appear to be original. The historic dormers are constructed so as to match the roof shingles and house a modestly sized fixed triangle-shaped window. Many of the newer shed dormers were clearly later additions, and they do not all meet landmark standards and guidelines. Some do not match the materials of the house, others are located very close to the front facade or are of an inappropriate length. This proposed dormer has a significant setback, and even though it is 10 foot 6 inches in length, its setback is such that it visually will not read all that different from a narrower dormer. So because of the historic precedent of visible dormers in the district, their commonality, and the 45-foot setback, staff recommends that it is not an adverse impact to the roof line of the building. So staff recommends approval, with the condition that the shingles match the rest of the roof and that the fiber cement siding be smooth. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Emily. Does the committee have any questions of Emily this time? I don't see any hands up. Seems pretty straightforward. Is the applicant is here?
I believe so, if they held on with us.
If they held on.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Doug Gilbert. I'm the architect for the owner.
Okay.
And I assume everybody can hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'll be very brief. Speaking on behalf of my client, who actually was a part of helping to establish the Claremont Cottage District. So she was very eager to maintain the historic character of the property, which I think hopefully we've done. And I actually think the shed dormers on this property may be original based on the trim work and all that are on the inside. But the dormers, it's really actually a 1.5 story house. Just want to emphasize that. Without the dormers, I think there is a section you may have seen. Without the dormers, the wall height at the perimeter walls is only 5.5 feet. And so even with the dormer, that'll be a 7-foot height there before you get into the center of the house where you get a more standard ceiling height. And so they're really absolutely necessary to have any useful aspect to the upper floor. And traditionally the bedrooms and sleeping quarters were upstairs. So, as Emily pointed out, you know, we kept the new dormer, especially on the south side, which will be visible. We wanted to keep that in the same scale and proportion of the existing dormer on that size, and not, you know, make it taller, or, you know, it's longer, but it's you know, the same proportions and dimensions, which we also kept with the roof. We didn't want to make the roof any larger or anything, so that also makes us those dormers necessary. But with the north side having almost no visibility on those tight lots, we put more of the habitable space on that side, so we do need that dormer extending pretty much all the way down, both from the existing dormer and all the way into our new addition. And then the setback on the north side is to meet the zoning setback without having to go through an appeal process. On the south side, there'll be just a minor setback where we have a change of materials from the brick to the fiber cement siding, you know, probably about 1 inch or so for a slightly less thick wall. But you'll see that differential materials. So I think that pretty well sums up what we're trying to do there. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Does the committee have any questions of Mr. Gilbert? Having none, I'd like to request a motion to accept.
Commissioner Hughes, did you have one?
Oh, I was just going to say that I appreciate that you guys are respecting the existing character and heritage of this area and the home, and keeping the proportions of the dormers within, you know, sort of that visual of what's existing. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the staff recommendations.
So move.
That was Commissioner Gary, and a second.
Second by.
A second by Commissioner Osmond. Commissioner Hughes, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. And thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert, for your patience, and good luck. All right, last one on the agenda, folks. Property located at 1936 South Michigan Avenue. This is the Second Presbyterian Church in the 3rd Ward, Alderman Dowell's ward. This is a proposed infill of an opening that previously contained a rose window with a new pre-finished aluminum panels. And Joyce, if you could tell us what's going on with this one.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Leon. The second.
Chairman, what's the other?
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It's been a few hours, so you know.
Okay, it's been a long day. Okay, the Second Presbyterian Church, located at the northwest corner of Michigan and Cullerton, was built between 1872 to 1874 and was designated by nationally renowned architect James Renwick. After the Great Chicago Fire damaged the roof and interiors of the church, the reconstruction was led by well-known architect Howard Van Dorenshaw and noted Chicago artist Frederick Clay Bartlett. The Second Presbyterian Church is most noted for its Gothic-inspired spotted limestone facades, magnificent stained glass windows, fine frescoes, and decorative wood carvings and chandeliers. The building was designated a Chicago landmark in 1977 and is listed on both the on both the State Register of Historic Places and the National Register of Historic Places. Based on historic photographs, a rose window was originally installed at the attic level of the south facade prior to the 1900 fire at the church. It is unknown whether the window was repaired or removed after the fire. The date of the installation of the non-original infill assembly is also unknown. In 2015, WJE was hired by the church to perform a critical examination of all facades to submit to the City of Chicago. The existing wood infill was reviewed up close as indicated on the photos on this slide. Loose wood material from the exterior was removed, and it was noted that the entire assembly could be moved by hand. Per WJE's recommendation, the church installed an interior strap anchors to retain the assembly in the opening. This repair was considered temporary, and permanent repairs or replacements was recommended within the next several years. During the 2019 close-up facade inspection, additional loose and rotted wood material on the exterior of the infill assembly was observed. Removal of severely rotted pieces of exterior cladding allowed for confirmation that no portion of the original wood window is present within the opening. WJE recommended that the rotted wood on the exterior of the infill assembly to be removed and replaced within the next year to limit the potential for hazardous conditions. The applicant is proposing to remove the existing wood cladding and glass lights in the location highlighted in yellow in the south elevation drawing. The applicant is proposing to install a new metal stud framing, plywood sheathing, a weather-resistive barrier, and flat pre-finished aluminum cladding panels in either a black or midnight bronze color, as shown in the material and color samples on the bottom right. Although the original rose window has long since been removed, the design of the proposed infill will appear to be remarkably plain with unadorned flat vertical panels and is not compatible with the building. The proposed infill is a reversible element and will not remove or damage the existing limestone opening if a more historically appropriate replacement will be added in the future. However, the proposed aluminum panels are in no way similar in design, construction, function, appearance, or material of the original rose window. Staff has suggested alternative treatments that will reference the original rose window tracery, such as etching or painting a pattern on the panels that would resemble the historic rose window, or installing a screen with a cutout pattern of the tracery over the aluminum cladding panels to also add depth and proportion. The applicant has considered these suggestions, but ultimately wishes to proceed with the aluminum cladding panels as proposed. Staff would like the design of the infill to be improved and recommends the proposed installation of the pre-finished aluminum cladding panels in the bronze color that is approved, with the condition that an element be added on the exterior face of the panels that provides a reference to the original rose window through a more detailed treatment that acknowledges the original pattern, depth, proportions, and or color. And that dimension details and product information shall be submitted with the permit drawings for review and approval by historic preservation staff. The church has reviewed this project with Alderman Dowell, and she has submitted a letter of support for the proposed aluminum cladding panel infill. Sarah Van Dummelen from WJE is here to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Does the committee have any questions of Joyce at this time?
I do.
Go ahead, Commissioner Osmond, please.
Joyce, why is there resistance to having the decorative element?
We just feel resistant to a decorative. We want to have it more decorative.
No, I know, but why is the client, the second pres, resistant to it?
I would actually defer to them to answer that question. Is Sarah on the line still?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Sarah, could you answer that question, please?
Absolutely. Sorry, switching around on my screens here.
I do need you to state your full name and
Hi, I'm Sarah Van Dummelen. I work at WJE. I'm the design engineer for the church on this project. And I can answer their question about the church's perspective. Their position is they would really like to be able to conserve funding for a potentially historically accurate intervention down the line. They also have a very long list of other exterior maintenance projects at this building. So knowing that the existing wood infill panel is not historic and does not replicate the historic window in any way, it's their feeling that a flat panel really isn't any worse than what's there, and it removes the hazard and saves money. But they are aware of the staff's recommendation as well, and can look into the possibility of adding the decorative element. It really is just a cost factor.
I would say, you know, over my career, I've worked a lot with this church. They're a very, very dedicated group. They're very concerned about, you know, the church is kind of falling down around them, and they're trying to piece together whatever they can with limited funds, and they're very dedicated to preservation. So I do respect where the church is coming from on this, because I understand their financial restraints, which are severe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any of the other committee members have any questions of the applicant or comments?
More a comment. I live a block from Second Presbyterian Church, so it's part of my daily walks. And yeah, I understand. I was very aware when one of the very big incidents in the church, and the gargoyles, the gargoyles that broke from the facade, and how it was scaffolded for a number of years after that. So I do understand. I just think it's also it's a loss, right? So if we start just, you know, replacing this element with much more flatter surfaces and losing those things, it's going to be a loss for a lot of the character of that building, which is, you know, it's holding a corner that it's very prominent on Michigan Avenue. I do understand that the cost. I feel like also there are other elements to the church that are incredibly beautiful and valuable. Yeah, I just wanted to express the understanding, but also the sadness in continue to losing elements of the character of the historical character of the building.
Thank you. Commissioner Gary.
You know, I understand the argument of cost as well. And I also think that there's, you know, other resources available. And I think some of the recommendations that the staff made were like cost-effective recommendations. You know, paint is not very expensive. Etching is also not very expensive. And so I think I'm going to go with the staff on this one. I would, you know, side with them in recommending that they find some type of way to pay homage to what that opening used to be during its glory days. And who knows how long the panels are going to be up there while they're finding the funding, you know? And so it's quite frankly going to be an eyesore to have those plain panels up there, you know, in an opening that used to be so ornamental and full of detail. So I think I'm going to side with the staff on this one.
I guess the only comment go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we are flexible with the design, but at the same time, we want to get a design that is more compatible. So we can keep working with the church on that, but just something that's a little bit more detailed than the flat panels.
Right. Thanks, Joyce. That actually was going to be my comment as well. I think that, and I'm right down the street as well from this church, and although it's not within my daily walk, I have spent a lot of time both around it as well as inside of it. And what's distressing to me with the flat panel, and Commissioner Hughes, you're absolutely right. Painting and etching is a very simple way to show care and love to a structure of this, you know, building of this stature, especially in this neighborhood. And as long as this panel is going to be there, and who knows how long it's going to be there, at least that symbol will be there at a very, very prominent location I also know that, you know, every time I go and I look at a church anywhere in the world, that piece that where it used to be a stone, you know, stained glass window or whatever, is the first thing that catches my eye. And I think that it would be extremely important to give that a little bit of definition. And quite frankly, that kind of care and love may end up helping with the fundraising for the rest of the church, because I think that people will recognize, here's a congregation that wants to see something happen, and will do something to that shows that. So, with that, I'd like to call for a motion to accept the staff recommendation. Commissioner Osmond? Moved.
I would like to make a motion that we approve it, but that we ask staff to work within the budget confines of the church coffers of Second Presbyterian.
Thank you, Commissioner Osmond. So is there a second to that? Commissioner Hughes? Yes, second? All right. Commissioner Geary, your vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So this motion carries unanimously. This is the last piece on our agenda. I am going to call for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you for your patience today. It has been extremely long, and I am going to be looking at the presidential debate rules, how they change, and see how that's applicable.
I would appreciate that, Chairman.
Thanks, Chairman.
All right.
I will also go to you for some training for future.
Commissioner Gary, you're doing fine. Thank you. You guys have a nice night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.